Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Communist Party of China's 19th National Congress. I'm Li Dongli in Beijing. Well, the one-week meeting is drawing to an end, and General Secretary Xi Jinping holds the closing session today. What delegates decide will determine the future of the party for the next 5 years, and who will be in the top leadership, how the party's ideology will be defined, how the country manages its economic growth, and what China's choices mean for the rest of the world. Well, for more discussions on that, we have our reporters standing by in cities such as Beijing, Chengdu and Shenyang. And also in the studio today, we're joined by Mr. Lawrence Brahm, chairman of Himalayan Consensus, and also Zhang Zhiping, Director General of the Center for Regional Cooperation, Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. And they will share with us some insight into China's biggest political event. So now let's go live to our reporters Han Peng, John Terrett and Lindy Mutgana. They are currently outside the Great Hall of the People. Hello there, everyone. Good morning to you all. The week-long party congress will soon draw to an end. What's on the agenda today? Could you share with us your observations?
Before we start, let me introduce two of my colleagues, Lindy Mutgana from Nairobi and also John Terrett coming all the way from DC to join us here at the heart of the Chinese capital in the Great Hall of the People. And here right behind me you can see reporters are already lining up to get into the Great Hall of the People in order to cover this very big moment of this party congress, which is now wrapping up. Today we're expecting over 2,000 delegates casting their votes and approved some of the major documents, including the amendment of the party congress, as well as the two work reports, one by General Secretary Xi Jinping and the other by the Central Commission of the Discipline Inspection, which has punished a major anti-corruption body of the Communist Party, which has punished over 1 million officials over the past 5 years. And also the most important issue coming up from this year, the wrapping up of this year's party congress, is the leadership change. We're expecting the election result of over 2,000 Central Committee members of the Communist Party, but the so-called most powerful 7 members of the Communist Party will be released. The result of their election will be released tomorrow. They are the 7 members of the Standing Committee of the Communist Party. But before all this, let's talk a little bit about what has happened in the past week. Here we have Zhang joining us. Would you tell us a little bit about what has impressed you the most over the past week here in downtown Beijing?
Yes, and you want me to be really honest, don't you? You want my honest opinion.
Of course.
My honest opinion. You know, I can't get out of my mind that 3-hour, 20-minute speech. I mean, I was in the Great Hall of the People right here for it. I sat through all of it. I listened to all of it. But I was racking my brains. I've been very lucky to cover a lot of politics in Europe and in North America. I cannot think of an occasion when a politician has gone on for 3.5 hours. It would be simply unacceptable in those cultures to go on for that long. In America, where I presently live, and in Europe, where I used to live, political speeches generally last no more than about an hour. And so I think that's a real cultural difference right there. The fact that the leader has to come and to speak for 3.5 hours, setting out what has happened in the previous 5 years, and then predicting what he hopes will happen in the 5 years coming up. And the other thing that really struck me, and I don't think that people in the West truly understand this, is that the president has to come and is called the General Secretary at this point for this week, and he essentially has to ask for his job back. Now, of course, in America, politicians do this all the time. They ask the people to re-employ them. We accept that. But I don't think, generally speaking, people understand that even the president of China has to account for himself for the previous 5 years and essentially say, please may I come back for another 5 years.
Of course, that's really important because every 5 years there will be a leadership change right here in China. And actually not only the president or the General Secretary Xi Jinping, but also every member of the Communist Party need to come here to review their past 5 years and need to ask their job back.
See, I think in the West there's a sense that if you're the president of China, then you're the president until you die or until you want to retire.
that's
And it's not
completely
true.
prejudice in the
Absolutely,
West.
yes.
Right? And also about the 3-minute speech, 3-hour
hour
speech.
speech.
Actually, each one is quite condensed already because China is such a large country, and each one sentence of that speech might be developed into a whole hour
Yes,
speech.
well,
So it's very different.
I am reminded that Fidel Castro used to go on for 8 hours at a time. So by that comparison, it was really quite a breeze.
Yes, definitely. Let's join Lindy for a moment about what impressed you the most. I think this year we have seen a lot of openness on this year.
Absolutely. And I think one way to measure that openness has been through the presence of journalists at this year's National Congress. I think the number is something like 1,800 journalists, foreign journalists from about 134 countries around the world. I've met other reporters from Cameroon, from Senegal, from Mozambique. So you can also see that Africa has taken a really big interest in this event.
Why do you think is that? Why African countries are so interested?
I mean, definitely over the past 5 years, there has been a particular rise in the relationship between China and Africa. There's been notable events on the continent, like the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, known as FOCAC, that took place in South Africa in 2015. There's also been the Belt and Road Initiative and new infrastructure projects that have been taking place on the continent that are, driven by Chinese investment. And I think that has really made African observers, African experts, African governments realize that we need to pay attention to what happens within the Communist Party of China itself. And so this 19th CPC National Congress provided a little bit of a window into really like the sort of the engine of the CPC, and in some ways then the engine of China itself. And I must say I was quite impressed by the openness with which the CPC greeted journalists and reporters. So I think I had the impression beforehand that perhaps there was a bit of a cautious relationship between media and government here, but actually, journalists were posing some hard questions at senior CPC delegates, and at those press briefings I attended, they didn't shy away from answering them. And that's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, actually this time many of the media call this the unprecedented openness of the party congress, because if we look back into the history, actually for the first 5 party congresses in the past, they were actually being held secretly, even after the conference is wrapped up, right? Because at the time the Communist Party is a revolutionary party and it fears to be cracked down by some of the ruling parties, also the Japanese aggressors at the time. But now it's a completely different story. It's been opening to media, holding numerous press conferences, and also holding this delegate corridor on which the reporters can just stop the delegates and drag them down violently and ask them questions, right?
Not violently, my friend, no, but to drag them down, maybe. But that was brand new this year, right? That's the first time this year that there's been such a delegate corridor.
Yes.
So that is new.
Yeah, that's why we call it unprecedented openness.
Well, Vladimir Putin, who's the Russian leader, called this Congress unprecedentedly open. That's what he said.
Yes.
And I also witnessed this as well, because I went, and I know Lindy went as well, to see a delegation, in my case, from Sichuan province in the southwest of the country, who were in town to talk up and speak on behalf of obviously to read through the speech and to kind of ratify the speech, but also to speak up for their province as well. And people around the world will know Sichuan province because it's where the pandas come from. Everybody loves the pandas.
Yes. One more thing we noticed this year, I think both of you would notice, is the change in the so-called great contradiction in China.
Yes.
I think that's not a very familiar term for foreigners, but I think you have a lot of thought on that, right?
Well, I do. I mean, the great contradiction, the great contradiction has been in place for like 30 years or whatever, hasn't it? And until this
40 years.
40 years or so, yes. Until this party congress, the great contradiction was the people wanting to be able to have good housing and to be able to eat versus the fact that China had backward production.
Yes.
Okay. Now, according to General Secretary Xi Jinping, the great contradiction has shifted. And this is, in a way, one of the major things to come out of this National Congress. It is now the desire for a better life, if you will. So that's, more freedoms, maybe, more justice, certainly, fairer treatment, that sort of thing.
And
versus how did you phrase it? Because I keep forgetting.
It's the very abstract official term, but it's immensely important. It's the backward. It's the backward was the original one. It's the inadequate and unbalanced development.
Inadequate and we see this in Sichuan province because in the capital city and the other big cities there's moderately reasonable growth, but also terrible poverty once you get outside the main cities, and that's what General Secretary Xi was talking about when he talked about imbalance, wasn't it?
because here in Beijing, it looks like a developed country already, but there are still a lot of poor areas, and also we still have 40 million people who are impoverished, and 5 years ago it was 90 million, and over the past 5 years it's been cut half, over half, and in just 3 years it will be reduced to, guess what, 0.
So Han Pan, is that the major headline for you, the fact that we have a new big contradiction?
Actually, that is the most important thing coming up this year, because for decades since the reform and opening up, we've all been learning from our textbooks back in the middle school or primary school that the contradiction was the one they were talking about, that people's need for better food and better housing. But now it becomes people's need for better development in their own lives. What do you think about that?
I do think that it is one of those challenges that can be applied in many countries around the world. Indeed, in Africa, you'll see that some countries have incredible economic growth over the past number of years, but that growth is not always equal. And so there are great disparities between the rich and the poor. That growth seems to benefit a certain section of society and not everyone. But it is definitely encouraging to hear that the CPC takes this so seriously that it is now going to be the central focus of their agenda in the years to come. It's really quite something certainly that many African countries should be paying attention to.
Exactly, because over the past 40 years, when the contradiction was about the backward supply, we have seen how the Communist Party is trying to solve that great contradiction by achieving an economic miracle over the past 40 years. And over the past 40 years, it's all about making the cake bigger. But now it's more about having, for everyone to have a better share of that cake that is already big, but it's still not big enough.
Yes, and as the President said, as the General Secretary said, we've had rapid growth in the economy over the last, certainly 20, 25 years. Now it's time to focus on high quality,
yes,
rather than rapid expansion.
Yes. So here's Zhang and Lindy and also Han Peng joining us in the Great Hall of the People. And now back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, lady and gentlemen, Han Peng, Lindy, and also John, especially our foreign correspondents who shared with us their very fresh view about the 19th Party Congress, since it's their first time to be in Beijing to cover a political session like this. And for more discussion into this, let's go to our studio guests for some insights. We have, as we introduced at the beginning of the program, Mr. Lawrence Brahm, founder of Himalayan Consensus, and also Mr. Zhang Jianping from the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Welcome to our special coverage on the 19th Party Congress, gentlemen.
Thank you.
First of all, a question to both of you. You two must have listened to the 3.5-hour long report made by General Secretary Xi Jinping on October the 18th. And central to the report is the socialism with the Chinese characteristics has entered into a new era with new contradictions. Now, let's start with discussing about what this new contradiction really means. According to General Secretary Xi Jinping, he said it affects the whole landscape. Actually, according to Karl Marx, the principal contradiction is what defines the society. If it is properly addressed, properly defined and solved, then the society can develop smoothly and peacefully. But left unsolved, the society can go to chaos or even revolution. So it is a very important question indeed. Well, before we discuss the new contradiction, let's take a brief look at the old ones. In 1949, the contradiction was the people versus imperialism, feudalism, and remnants of the KMT forces. Of course, later it evolved into the contradiction between proletariat versus the bourgeois, which led to a bit of chaos in the country, of course. But in 1981, when the opening up and reform policy was launched, shortly after that, the contradiction became the ever-growing material and cultural needs of the people versus backward social production. These two, 1949, 1981, were two very important and critical junctures of time for China. And now we have new contradiction between unbalanced and inadequate development and the people's ever-growing need for a better life. So how should we understanding the timing of the new contradiction, Mr. Zhang?
Yeah, my understanding is today China has become, the second biggest economy in the world. Meanwhile, China's per capita GDP already about $8,000, and we accumulated the biggest foreign exchange reserve in the world. So that means China is already on a certain development level. However, if you look at China's development in the past 40 years, are quite imbalanced. You can see that between urban area and rural area imbalanced. And if you look at China's social development imbalanced, also if you look at China's supply side and the demand side in economy also imbalanced. So those imbalance cause unsatisfied feeling in China's residents. For example, a lot of Chinese people prefer to go shopping overseas instead of domestic market. Also, if you
because
look at,
they cannot be satisfied from within the country.
Yes. Also for domestic residents, when they want to see doctor in hospital, you will find a lot of people crowd over there, where you have to wait for a long time. Also, if you look at to accept better education in city, you have to move from rural areas go to urban areas, because in rural areas lack of enough education resources, something like that. Also, but in those urban areas, a lot of people complain about traffic jams, serious traffic jams, environmental pollutions, bad air qualities, something like that. So in this regard, I think that we realize that we have to, provide, better solutions to solve those type of problems. That means the new contradictions. We have to find some of, better ways.
Well, we'll be getting back to you, gentlemen, especially you, Lawrence, for your understanding of what new contradiction means as a foreigner staying in China for quite a long time. Let's learn more about the concept of building a moderately prosperous society, which was raised at the 16th CPC National Congress, and China is bringing that to a close as it stands at the crossroads of a new era where Chinese people now require more than just decent material lives, as what just Mr. Zhang said. In his report to the 19th Party Congress, General Secretary Xi Jinping stressed the people's growing demands for rule of law, fairness and justice, security and a better environment.
我国社会主要矛盾已经转化为
While China's overall productive forces have significantly improved, and in many areas our production capacity leads the world, our problem is that our development is unbalanced and inadequate. This has become the main constricting factor in meeting the people's increasing need for a better life.
Now, for more insight into the Congress, let's talk to Dr. Robert Lawrence Kuhn. He's a CGTN host and also public intellectual, international corporate strategist and investment banker. Hello there, Mr. Kuhn. Xi Jinping mentioned the new concept called a new contradiction in his report to the Party Congress, and we briefly discussed that with our studio guests. What's your understanding to that?
Well, certainly one has to look at the Marxist way of thinking, dialectical materialism, the opposing dynamic forces in society, and looking for the principal ones, and this, you've discussed the history. I think what's important now is to understand that this new contradiction defines a difference between a quantitative approach to China's economy and China's society, which has always been true in the past, to now a qualitative approach. It is no longer critical to set very specific GDP growth numbers, which really have their own artificiality to it. It's more important to deal with the complexity of issues that China's society deals with. And it's not just determined by numbers, it's determined by the people's happiness and well-being through all the different categories that we've talked about: healthcare, education, getting rid of pollution, traffic jams, all the inconveniences of life. As the Chinese society has improved and increased, people have different demands, and you can no longer meet these demands purely by GDP growth. Sometimes GDP growth is counterproductive. You just generate more pollution and more, sometimes overcapacity and extra investment that's not needed. by focusing on people orientation, which of course is the core of President Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, that gives a different orientation, a different lens by which to view China's development, and it's a very critical development.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Robert Lawrence Kuhn, and my colleague in CGTN, and he's also public intellectual, international corporate strategist, and investment banker. You've been watching our special coverage on the 19th Party Congress. We'll be right back.
Every 5 years, the Chinese Communist Party holds its National Congress. This month, the 19th Congress opens in Beijing. It will elect a new central leadership and chart the course for the party as well as the country over the next 5 years and beyond. Who will step into the party's top leadership, the Politburo Standing Committee? Will the Congress look to amend the party constitution? Which direction will the anti-corruption campaign be heading? How will the CPC manage the Chinese economy, foreign affairs, and military? Tune into CGTN for all the answers as the CPC decides.
Welcome back to our special coverage on the 19th Party Congress. And for more discussion, let's go back to our studio guests. Gentlemen, Mr. Zhang just said about his understanding to the concept of new contradiction. What about you, Lawrence, as a foreigner staying in China for a long time indeed? And also let's put new contradiction, the timing of the contradiction into a world escape. For instance, what's the international environment for the General Secretary Xi Jinping's such a idea of new contradiction?
Well, let's just look at the whole spectrum of historic contradictions, and we'll just take it from one point of view. Mao Zedong wanted to, in 1949, kick out the colonial occupation of China's port cities. Deng Xiaoping, fast forwarding 30 years later, was trying to bring in foreign investment, and now it's Chinese foreign investment going outbound across the world. China is now the global investor in the world. So you have a massive transformation of what's happened not only in China but in the entire global arena. Now, we talk about Marxism in the New Age. The New Age is the most important phrase that's really come out of Xi's speech in this Congress. And really, Marx was talking about class struggle. And really what's happening now is it's about creating the middle class and managing the expectations of the middle class so there's no class struggle. I think that's the target here. Because these past 30 years of rapid economic development has created distortions in the economy. I think that's a more economic way of phrasing it rather than contradictions per se. You suddenly have urban centers that are stressed under the load of migrant workers as well as urban residents. And while you might have the area we're in now, the CBD, the Central Business District, has some of the most modern facilities and infrastructure, that infrastructure is overstretched. Meanwhile, you have in the countryside villages that are vacated, that are empty. So, Mao Zedong, back in 1940, in the 1940s said the countryside should take over the cities. Now it's really the cities taking over the countryside. And the international arena, we had back in the 50s the contradiction of the post-colonial nations, the underdeveloped countries trying to find their paths of development. And at that time, much of it was about decolonization, it was about revolution, it was about overthrowing the yoke of foreign control. Now we have a situation where we really see the re-emergence of a non-aligned movement, but really through the Belt and Road Initiative, business and finance driving development, and more so green finance.
Right.
This is also a major change, is the fact that China is introducing...
It is also a very key message sent through Xi's report on the 18th, on the 19th Party Congress, indeed. We'll be continuing our discussion later on. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Our reporters are standing by in Beijing, Shenyang, Chengdu, and Chengdu. They will be bringing us more on the major achievements of different regions of China in the past 5 years and also previews for plans in the years to come. And in Beijing, we will have two reporters getting the latest, one from the Central Business District, as what Lawrence just introduced, and one in the city's downtown area. They will be showing us the new and old parts of the city. They'll also be talking to the people on the ground to get their expectations. And now let's go to our reporter Su Yiting, who joins us from Beijing's Central Business District. Yiting, could you tell us more about the development of the new area in Beijing?
Well, Dongning, the Central Business District area is a symbol of the new Beijing, which has undergone dramatic and impressive transformation. And you know that it's very significant for the city to improve the well-developed infrastructure. And you know that this area is also home to 80% of the international organizations of the city and also 70% of the Beijing-based global headquarters of Fortune 500 companies. And you know that people in the city and live in this CBD just enjoy the advantages provided by the organization. There are huge job opportunities and also well-developed infrastructure. But at the same time, people also complain about many problems, such as deteriorating air quality and also the traffic jam. It's very terrible, as you can see behind me, especially during the rush hour. And you can sense the atmosphere around me because it's hustle and bustle metropolitan life. And tall buildings and skyscrapers are everywhere here in the CBD. But you know that it's very significant because General Secretary Xi Jinping has emphasized in the report to the 19th National Congress that the contradiction we face in the country is that the contradiction between the unbalanced and inadequate development between people's ever-growing needs and demands for a better life. And recently, the city has already released a very important urban plan from 2016 to 2035, just making a goal to making Beijing is a world-class the city which has a livable and also harmonious one. And you know that the two major objectives in the plan is to remove the non-capital function and also to prevent the big city diseases. And it's also mentioned the efforts to maintain and preserve the old Beijing. For more on that, my colleague Wang Hui will give you more details.
The average salary for Beijing people is about 120,000 yuan. Well, thank you so much, Yiting. From her description, we have seen the flashy side of Beijing. However, that's just one side of the city. To the big majority of Beijing people, to live here is not that easy. Now I'm in Nanhaizi community. It's about 15 minutes walking from Tiananmen Square. You can see that the narrow streets beside me is called Hutong. It's one of the signatures of the Beijing city. So now let's check out the real ordinary Beijing people's real lives. Follow me. This is a Sihe Yuan in Chinese. It's a courtyard, actually. It's a very traditional Beijing-style structure. And in this very limited living space, 3 families are living here. We can tell that the area is very small, the space is very limited, and they have to share public toilet. So it's not very convenient for them. But they still choose to stay here. Why? Because the property prices in Beijing is super high. And there was a figure from the Zhaopin.com job hunting website. It shows that the average salary of a Beijing person is about 120,000 yuan a year. And the average housing price in Beijing is about 60,000 yuan per square meter. So it means that if you work in Beijing without spending any penny in a year, you will only be able to buy 2 square meter housing in Beijing. People joke that it's only enough for a toilet. Okay, this is a courtyard. Oh, there's a gentleman here. Let's say hello to him. 大爷您好。
Hello,
您好
good morning.
我是王慧，中央电视
My
台
name
英
is
语
Wang
频道的
Hui
记
from
者。
CGTN.
你好，你好，你好。
Good morning.
里边请。
好嘞，好嘞，这
Welcome
您家是吗？
To my home.
啊，这是您家
So
是
this
吗
is your home, right?
您在这儿
Yes.
住多少年了？
How long have you been here? For 60 years
这是你
already.
们家人。
So this is your family picture, right? Yes, this is myself, my son,
老母亲。
daughter-in-law, my mom,
一家人。
my grandson,
对，
the whole family. So being here for a very, very long time, you're also keeping living here?
文物
No.
同志准备要搬迁了。
Oh, we have the plan to move in because in the country's master plan, we're in the plan to move. So how that impact your daily life? Yes, it impacts, of course.
居住环境改善一点。
But my living environment will be improved and my house will be
困难。
bigger. But I will also face some difficulties.
因为
What kind of
搬得比较远，受
difficulties?
欢以外。
As first, I will move really, really far, like 4 or 5th ring outside. So it's not very convenient for my sons and daughters go to work and for my grandchild go to school and also difficult for me to go to the hospital. So it's very, very far away from the central place of the city. So it's not very convenient. We need to travel far distance.
孩子上学呢，因为刚上小学有的，有的
So
上
my
中学那
grandson,
就甭管了。
if go to the senior school is okay, but from grandson, just for the elementary school, and we can't afford the price
凑合着住。
of property housing in central city, and we just can rent
6几10米的两居室
a property. I say 2 living rooms around 8,000 RMB per month.
不介意，不介意。
Do you mind if I ask your disposable income per month? 4,000,
3600。
and my spouse around 3,600. So overall together around 7,000 RMB per month, and the rental is around 8,000. So basically, we need to find actual 1,000 RMB for the rental. So live here for so many years, not really easy to move and living here, right? Yes, a lot of emotions here with me, a very strong link. I have a lot of good neighbors.
那个对家的一个不舍的感觉吧。
I don't want to leave. Very strong emotions here. So this is my neighbor. We knew each other for many years. I'm from CGTN. We have a lot of international audience. I just talked to Mr. Liang and Mr. Chen. You've been here also for many years? Yes. How long? Around more than 60 years. I talked to Mr. Liang about their future plan and changes. And for you, what kind of changes have you experienced? Actually, if we only talk about the last 5 years, I can say we have experienced the surprise every year, and we have changes every day. We focus a lot on food, transportation, the children going to school, a lot of difficulties we thought before, and right now we have already witnessed the changes in every aspect of our key concerns. We feel very happy about that. Any small difficulties you are facing? Yes. Some difficulties have not been solved yet. But I think with the year to come, we are fully confident that the changes will be promising. Today is coming to the end of the 19th National Congress. What is your key concern? We have already seen that there are some actions and measures been taken in the national education, increase the access of education, and for the medical reforms, they will link the big hospitals to the community clinics, and also for the elderly service at home, that will be a big improvement in the years to come. I focus on the military and the party building. That's very impressive. So the party will take have already taken very strong and tough steps in anti-corruption, and under the strong leadership with General Secretary Xi Jinping, I think this will continue for sure. And for military building, they provide very great contributions to make us safe, so we can focus on our building our happy life with a strong leadership and strong army. One sentence for your expectation? So President Xi Jinping can be in the position for more years. I expect our party, our nation, be more cuter, much cuter, and we will dedicate ourselves to the great journey for the future.
That's all we have today, and thank you so much, and back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Yuting and Wang Hui, for your sharp contrast of the CBD area in Beijing and the Hutong area also in Beijing, two different worlds indeed. Now, let's get back to our studio guest, gentlemen. The new contradiction, the contradiction between the unbalanced, inadequate development and also the people's ever-growing need for a better life. Mr. Zhang, as a Chinese, what's your concept of a better life?
You know that this is a Beijing example. Today, Beijing has already been internationalized. Also, if you look at Beijing's economic structure, more than 75% of Beijing GDP from service sectors, you know, including financial services, business services, consulting services, many professional services, something like that. Also, if you look at Beijing's manufacturing sectors, 25% of Beijing GDP from high-tech sectors. So in this regard, you may find that just before those low-income group, actually they lack of enough capacity to be involved in those modern service sectors and high-tech sectors.
So the big income gap is still there. So, but Mr. Zhang, from an ordinary citizen, Chinese citizen or Beijing citizen's angle, what does, for instance, one day of you in terms of better life would mean?
Yeah, I think that maybe they need to explore, you know, new business model for them, and they should improve their capacity in order to have better job, you know, in urban areas. For example, tourism sectors or business service sectors, or something like that. That means that you have to have enough capacity to do this type of job. Also, of course, I appreciate, you know, both central and local governments need to provide enough fund or, you know, options for those, you know, low-income, you know, group to accept, you know, education and training courses, and then improve their capacity to deal with those problems. Another critical factor that is we need to make, you know, our social security system cover those low-income group. Meanwhile, we need to provide more and more, you know, public goods, public service to, you know, release their burden.
What about you, Lawrence, as a foreigner in China, in Beijing? What kind of a better life do you want?
Well, first of all, I want to look back at the 80s and 90s, because in those days I was a lawyer here, and we were trying to bring in foreign investment and reform state-owned enterprises to make them efficient and to increase industrial output. And that was then solving the problem of giving people work, employment, and making these enterprises competitive. Now, fast forwarding to today, the problem is how to restructure the energy system because of all the pollution, which, you know, you have so much carbon and so much, you know, this is a contaminated 50 to 60% of China's water supply that has created food security, health security issues, and these have gone right to the core issue of people's quality of life. So I think it was very clear from President Xi's opening speech and over the past few days, the priorities now are on creating a quality growth rather than a quantity growth. It's not just about giving people jobs, it's about managing their expectations, and it's about closing the gaps. And you know, you had this wonderful coverage of the Hutongs. I live in the Hutongs, and I was part of the early work to restore the courtyards. And in those days, the government didn't want to protect. Their view was we need modern, we have to look to the West.
Right.
But now we have a looking back to China for the China solution. The answers from economics and politics are in the culture and in the heritage. And likewise, it's not about turning to Western culture. It's about really resuscitating the very deep Chinese culture. And now even in our neighborhood, the government's coming in with a lot of investment to preserve the very heritage that a few decades ago they were knocking down. So this really shows a complete change of thinking.
Right.
This is also an aspect of the ecological civilization policy. It's now in the Constitution. It was, it took a major part of President Xi's speech. It's not just about reforms of enterprises and industry. It's about creating a new growth model around heritage preservation, environmental preservation, all the technology that's going to be required to give us smart, green, and blue cities.
So Bachelor means is a very much more comprehensive concept rather than being just fed, having enough food to eat.
It's not just about growth. It's also about quality of life.
Quality
it's about
of
your
life,
environment, water, food security,
culture,
and smart, green, and blue. That's the way to think of it.
All right, we'll be getting back to you, gentlemen, for more insights. And now let's go to our reporter Cui Huiao in northeast China's Shenyang, which is the capital city. The area is the cradle of China's heavy industry, but at the moment it's going through an economic slowdown. So what's in store for the region's development that we can gather from this year's session?
Hi there, Dong-Ning. Right, for northeastern China, the direction for the next 5 years is like what General Secretary and Chinese President Xi Jinping said, to further supply-side reform and make new ground in pursuing opening up on all fronts. But how do we exactly proceed with that goal? For instance, Jilin province is mostly known for its automobile, petroleum, and chemical industries, which have long been underpinning its economy and is really the epitome of the old industrial base. But that economic structure is undergoing such a big change at the moment, with agricultural product processing now taking the lead. For instance, the state-owned Jilin Grain Group is now the largest grain trader in northeastern China, and it has even built an industry chain that not only focuses on processing business itself, but also expanded to related sectors like machinery, pesticide, and other high-end agricultural technology. And it plans to add e-commerce, futures trading, and other financial services to its core business. So this is the kind of moves that give you the sense of the ongoing transformation of the SOEs here. And speaking of reform, many experts also see it as the key to revitalize this once thriving industrial base. And for companies, the only way to battle through a tougher global competition is to push further the reform and become more integrated and efficient. So among various discussions for the Northeast China, deepening reform is certainly the biggest takeaway from this year's CPC session. Back to you, Dong-Ning.
All right, thank you very much to Huiao reporting from northeast part of China. Now let's get back to our studio guests, Mr. Zhang and Mr. Brahm. Mr. Zhang, well, as we've seen that the gap in China not only includes the income gap between the rich and the poor, but also the imbalanced development between the different regions, different areas in China. For instance, in the eastern and the southern part of China and in north and northeast part of China, there's a huge difference, and the east and the west. So what has the government, the central government, done to address this problem, the imbalanced development between different regions in China?
Yeah. In China, actually, we have two types of imbalance for regional developments. One is, eastern-western imbalanced, and another is north and south, imbalanced. Actually, if you look at those south part of China, and they are aiming for market mechanism, and also they are more open to the world, and they also quite internationalized. So that's why today in north part of China, we already gradually get our new driving force. That is our innovation-oriented economic driving force. But if you look at north part of China, especially in northeast part of China, in the past deeply relying on traditional sectors, SOE, very huge SOE,
heavy industries.
Dominated their economy. And then today, actually, their relationship between government, local government, and enterprises still quite traditional. And then they lack of enough, new driving force for their economy. Also, that's quite different, unique culture and historical reasons. And then today, they quite behind, their economic performance not so good. So actually, from central governmental level, we realize this type of issues. We hope that our development could be more balanced, and then central, financial mechanism will be provided for those more balanced developments. Central government every year have their, transition, budget, financial fiscal budget for those less developed regions. And meanwhile, from central government, they encourage those, developed economies, developed provinces to provide their assistance, their help to those, central part of provinces and western part of, especially there will be every pair of, group to have this type of cooperation relationship. Another thing is that we encourage China's, big corporations, including private SOE, to invest much more in, poor regions. Also, we actually provided our preferential policies for those poor regions. For example, if you invest in west and central region of China, and your corporation income tax will be preferential, just 15%, something like that.
I'll be getting back to you, gentlemen, for more insight. Now, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee Xi Jinping stressed the importance of showing care and concern for the grassroots functionaries on the front line of poverty alleviation. Xi made the comments in a meeting with the Guizhou delegation. He added that those who perform well and demonstrate good qualities should be promoted.
The main battleground now is on the front lines of poverty alleviation. This is the most important task for the nation's first 100 years. The promotion of officials who grow up in the greenhouse should be at a slower speed. They should practice and be examined on the front lines to check whether they stand out or not before promotion.
And now let's go to Liu Yang in Chengdu, the capital city of southwest China's Sichuan province. General Secretary Xi, in his report to the Party Congress last week, emphasized the importance of poverty alleviation efforts and infrastructure development in rural areas. Now, how are people there responding to the local government's initiatives to tackle these issues, Liu Yang?
To build a moderately prosperous society, the key lies in the rural population. General Secretary Xi Jinping said the principal contradiction facing Chinese society now is between unbalanced and inadequate development and the people's ever-growing need for a better life. In other words, people need greater resources to succeed. In Sichuan, standards across the board in education have been greatly improved in recent years. Urban and rural residents have seen a significant growth in their incomes, while a social security system covering rural residents has been established and the standards in health have been greatly improved as a result. Last year, nearly 12.5 million people in rural areas were lifted out of poverty, and the central government has promised to keep this big effort going. Back in 2013, the province had more than 6 million people living in poverty, but now, through support from industries like IT, manufacturing, auto, and agriculture, that number has plummeted to fewer than 1 million. However, to reach this ambitious 2020 target of totally wiping out poverty, the local villages here is looking for more help from the 19th CPC Congress. It wants to take this principal contradiction head on and further improve infrastructure so people in remote areas can expand their small agriculture businesses and grow. Get back to you, Dongning.
All right, thank you very much, Liu Yang, for the introduction of a quite new, actually new mode of development in the capital city of southwest China's Sichuan province. And now for more on poverty alleviation and the regional development, let's get to our studio guest. Now, let's continue with our previous topic of the gap between the development of different regions. Well, Lawrence, you give advices to foreign investors to China. Then what would you recommend them to invest in, or which areas do you recommend to invest in China mostly?
A lot of work I did over the past few years was on the ecological civilization policy, and a lot of that involved actually European advisors coming into the team to work because of the technology. And of course, Europe has a lot of technology, advanced technology for renewable energy systems. And in Finland, for instance, you have homes that create their own energy and can sell their energy to other homes. Problem is the population of 4 million. In a country like Finland, it's too small. So if you can bring that technology here and expand it, the capacity increases, the costs reduce. And so if you think about that, any district in any city in China is about 4 million people, at least. And so by expanding the capacity, the costs reduce, and then that allows not only China to be able to shift the paradigm to green growth domestically, but on the Belt and Road policy to be able to export that. Foreigners who are involved in that collaboration will benefit. And I like your report just now on Chengdu, because I spent a lot of time in Sichuan last year looking at the process of urbanizing the countryside. Effectively, to keep the population or to shift the migrants back to their homes, you have to create a quality of life for them there as well, with all the things that they would enjoy in the city. And so the government there is doing a lot of that to invest into urbanizing the countryside, putting in place the healthcare systems and the commercial systems that will allow people to have businesses in their hometown. And one of the things that impressed me the most was actually Sichuan province, particularly the city of Chengdu, is all renewable energy. It's all hydropower. And so this is, again, marking the shift and the new economic driver away from fossil fuels, which have been driving the Northeast industries in your previous report, to now the renewable energy, which is going to be the next mega trend for this country in terms of investment, in terms of innovation, and in terms of opportunity and employment.
So is it one of your recommendations to invest in Chengdu, in Sichuan province, to
go where there's, as a foreign investor, go where there's elasticity, because elasticity is where there's opportunity. And again, one of the big areas of super growth in China right now is going to be in all of the areas of environmental technology, water conservation, recycling, and these technologies are existing in Europe. Bring them to China and expand the capacity.
I will be getting back to you, gentlemen, for more insights. You're now watching our special coverage of the 19th Party Congress, and we'll be right back after this.
Every 5 years, the Chinese Communist Party holds its National Congress. This month, the 19th Congress opens in Beijing. It will elect a new central leadership and chart the course for the party as well as the country over the next 5 years and beyond. Who will step into the party's top leadership, the Politburo Standing Committee? Will the Congress look to amend the party constitution? Which direction will the anti-corruption campaign be heading? How will the CPC manage the Chinese economy, foreign affairs, and military? Tune into CGTN for all the answers as the CPC decides.
Welcome back to CGTN's special coverage of the 19th Party Congress. Well, now let's take a look at what's really happening in the world. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson paid a surprise visit to Afghanistan on Monday to discuss with Afghan officials Washington's new strategy in the continuing war there. It was his first trip to Afghanistan as Secretary of State and comes several weeks after U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis also paid an unannounced visit there. Tillerson's visit follows one of the bloodiest weeks in Afghanistan in recent memory. More than 200 people were killed in multiple attacks on security installations and mosques across the country. And in the past 3 weeks, observers say the Islamic State killed more than 100 people in a Syrian town before the army recaptured it on Saturday. The Syrian Observatory of Human Rights said ISIL fighters massacred this month at least 128 people in the desert town of Al-Qaryatayn. And ISIL had reportedly accused the civilians of being government agents. The town is 300 kilometers east of Deir ez-Zor city, the current focus of a government offensive against ISIL. Russia is calling on Iraqi Kurds to work with the government in Baghdad. Russia's foreign minister delivered the message as he met with his Iraqi counterpart in Moscow. The meeting comes amid heightened tensions after the Iraqi military took the oil-rich city of Kirkuk from Kurdish forces. CGTN's Julia Lobova reports.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow respects the desire of Iraqi Kurdistan to assert its identity. However, he said this must be done in dialogue with the Iraqi government.
We confirmed the position of the Russian side in favor of resolving all the problems between the Iraqi government and the leadership of the Kurdish autonomy through constructive, respectful dialogue on the basis of the unity and territorial integrity of Iraq.
It comes after Sergei Lavrov held a meeting with his Iraqi government counterpart in Moscow on Monday. Lavrov said that Kurdistan must realize its independence hopes exclusively via the Iraqi government, taking into account the need to avoid additional sources of instability in the region. Lavrov also said that Moscow would continue its economic ties with Iraqi Kurdistan. Russia's oil giant Rosneft has recently agreed to take over Iraqi Kurdistan's main oil pipeline. Relations between Iraqi Kurdistan and the central government in Baghdad have reached a crisis level after Kurdistan held an independence referendum last month. Julia Lubova, CGTN, Moscow.
To Spain now, Madrid has threatened to impose direct rule on the autonomous region of Catalonia. That will require a Senate vote on Friday. The Catalan Parliament is set to debate its next move, and regional parties are meeting on Thursday. Madrid believes a vote for independence may be taken at that time. A far-left Catalan party is calling for protests to block the removal of the region's leaders. CGTN's Stephanie Fried reports from Barcelona.
We will not take orders from Spain. That is the word on Monday from the Catalonian Parliament, namely from the Foreign Minister, Raúl Romeva, who says those aren't his words or the Parliament's words. That's the choice of the people, and that's in reference to an October 1st referendum where the people of Catalonia voted for independence from Spain. Well, on the heels of that referendum, these announcements are coming, and that was October 1st, and a lot has transpired since and will continue to transpire this week. Here are some of the highlights of what we're expecting to happen this week. On Wednesday, Catalonian President Carles Puigdemont will be in Madrid, where he's expected to appeal Article 155. That's an article that was handed down by the Spanish Prime Minister on Saturday. It would essentially strip this area of its autonomy. So he's going to appeal out on the grounds of, apparently, that it's illegal. On Thursday, and could mean that Spain's central government takes control of police, of finances, of media, and on and on. What's the response here on the ground? Well, first of all, tourism is responding. It's down by 17 to 20% over last year. Also, there is speculation here more than fear. People don't know what will happen in the future, and that's what they're asking. What will happen economically? What's going to happen to them in terms of independence? What will happen to their freedoms? Last but not least, there are concerns of violence on the streets if the Spanish central government moves in, takes control. But I was talking with an analyst earlier in the day. He said he does not expect for Spain to send in, quote unquote, its heavies, meaning the national police. And that's because, according to this analyst, he doesn't think that the Spanish government will make the same mistake twice. And that's in reference to violent images that we saw come out of that October 1st referendum, images of police going head-to-head with people who were trying to vote. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Barcelona.
Welcome back to our special coverage on the 19th Party Congress. Now, Henan province in central China is one of the origins of the Chinese civilization. It's known for its huge population and agricultural production. And with the influence of key national policies, the province has grown to be an economic powerhouse. Now, for more on its major achievements over recent years, let's cross live to our reporter Meng Qingsheng in Chengdu, the provincial capital. Hello there, Qingsheng.
Good morning, Zhongning. As you mentioned, Henan province is a highly populated region of China with more than 100 million inhabitants, making it the country's third largest province. More people means more efforts should be made by local governments to ensure a decent quality of life for everyone. An obvious improvement here can be judged by the region's rising per capita disposable income. Since 2013, Henan has maintained an average economic growth of nearly 9% each year. As a result, the per capita disposable income for urban and rural residents has risen by 8% and 10% respectively. This can also be seen from the falling numbers of people in poverty. Since the 18th CPC National Congress in 2012, nearly 5 million people have been lifted out of poverty through employment, relocation programs, and social security measures. With the farmers comprising over half of Henan's population, the province has been working to train more than 1 million new professional farmers by 2020 in order to provide solid support for its agricultural modernization. However, as a result of urbanization, the rural population has been reduced by more than 7 million compared with 2010. This has also added pressure to education in rural regions. In some areas, there has been a sharp decline in the number of students. This is partly down to the unbalanced distribution of educational resources in the province. And yesterday, I visited 2 primary schools near the capital, in Chengdu. At Daqiao Primary School in downtown Chengdu City, 2,000 pupils gathered to start a new week. They're all looking sharp, dressed neat and tidy. Yet only about a quarter of them are actually from the area. The vast majority of them are only there because the school offers a good education.
I got transferred to this school from my village 2 years ago. I was really impressed by the spacious playground here. This school also offers a number of interesting extracurricular activities, and the classes are interesting.
Wang Yifei used to attend an under-resourced village school in Yuzhou City, about 70 kilometers from Chengdu. Now she's enjoying her new surroundings and developing her own academic interests, thanks to the help of qualified teachers and the inspiring facilities. We drove for an hour southward to the county-level city of Xinzheng, and then found our way inside a typical rural primary school, one much like Yifei's old one. Xugang Primary School was founded in the late 1940s. Yet it was only this year that the pupils started learning English, a core subject in China nowadays.
No new graduates have come here to teach in the past 10 years. We've only 6 teachers on the campus, teaching pupils from 6 different grades. The building needs to be repaired as the roof leaks during the rainy season. However, I've been working here for 8 years and have developed a deep fondness for everything. I wish the school never disappears.
This is one of the 20,000 primary schools in central China's Henan province. It had 200 pupils in its prime back in 2012. But due to a shortage of teachers, inadequate resources, and a canteen unable to meet health and safety standards, more than half the pupils have been taken out by their parents to seek a better school elsewhere. As the school has no canteen, the pupils have to return home for lunch. But this is only a petty inconvenience for most of those who choose to stay. They have much greater desires for other improvements.
I hope I can study at a bigger school with a library and where my fellow students could learn and play together. I also hope to have more teachers working here. It's better if each of them will focus on just one subject to teach.
As of the end of last year, the province had injected more than 16 billion yuan into improving the basic facilities and teaching resources of compulsory education schools.
This year, the province recruited 3,000 general teachers. They are helping rural children get education close to their homes. Though not all of them can move to the big city for a good education, we hope we can provide them with a fair start to their lives.
China has pledged to prioritize education in its next step of work.
where more and more pupils are benefiting from the recent improvements. For the time being, more efforts need to be made to strike a fairer balance into how educational resources are distributed. Meng Qingsheng, CGTN, Henan Province.
Zhongning, the uneven distribution of educational resources can also be found in the province's higher education system. The number of college applicants in Henan are among the highest in China. However, the province has only one top-level university. This means that students must work harder to gain access to quality education in resources other outside Henan. The local education department has made the development of the region's universities a top priority. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Qingsheng, reporting from Chengdu in Henan province. And now for more on the development situation in Henan province, very important and the most populous province in China indeed. We go back to our studio guests. Well, talking about poverty alleviation, the development in Henan province, that actually reminded me of a story told by a veteran editor in CCTV, a friend of mine, and he told me that he is from Henan province, from a rural area, but poverty problem is mainly a rural problem in China. That's a fact. But he told me that when he was little, the villagers actually had a promise that they had to bring back a bag of soil whenever they go back home from outside, because the soil was barren, was too barren to plant any crops in their village. So their village had nothing to eat and had no income from the plants, really. But until he went to college at 18, nothing happened. The crops still failed and the soil was still barren. But when he went back home like 12 years ago in 2005, he found out that a road, asphalt road, was built by the local government, and hence everything was provided to the village, enough soil and other opportunities of making money for the villagers, and the living standards was improved quite large. So that's actually one example of China's overall policy of communication to every village, and by communication not only means roads, but also internet, telephone calls, television, etc., etc. China actually has promised to lift 70 million people out of poverty by the year 2020. So under this kind of a targeted poverty alleviation model, do you see that happening? Do you see 70 million people going out of poverty by the year 2020, Mr. Zhang?
Yeah, you know that Henan is a very typical case, for poverty, reduction. In the past, actually, Henan province was seriously relying on agricultural sectors. You know that in China we have two very valuable experiences. One is if you want to be rich, the first thing is to pay road. Just before you mentioned that happening.
To get rich,
yeah.
To build first build road.
Yeah, and the second one that is without industrialization, without the manufacturing sectors, it would not be rich. You know that if you look at today in India, why so millions of people protest on the street in order to get their job without factories, without plants. In this regard, if you look at Henan province, Apple, assembling factory already stayed in Chengdu and provided only this factory provided more than maybe 100,000 jobs for local workers. That means it's no need for those Henan young workers as migrant workers to go to coastal areas, and they can stay at home. And I think that nowadays Henan already has a very ambitious goal. That is, they would be more opened. Especially today in Henan, they already have their free trade experimental zones. That's inland experimental zone. That means both international trade, international investment gradually will be moving. And then, those new manufacturing sectors, service sectors gradually will concentrate in Henan province. And in the future, gradually, they will make a lot of people, from rural areas go to urban areas. And then they can, reduce those poverty people. But another thing is that if some of people, they prefer, stay in rural areas.
Right.
Yeah, and how to do this? So I'm afraid that in China, we are good at to make, poverty reduction planning. Also, both, central government and provincial government, they provided some of funds to support poverty reductions. Also, we encourage those, rural areas people to explore their possible, new business model and new sectors. For example, tourism sectors. Today, a lot of Chinese people, went to those rural areas, enjoy, food and, sightseeing over there. And then those farmers can have new, business. So generally speaking, I think that by a very comprehensive, countermeasures in different regions, in different policies, in different, tools, and then gradually we can solve our, poverty reduction issues.
But Lawrence, you mentioned just now that Chairman Mao Zedong used the rural areas to get the victory in the urban areas, and now it's the other way around, indeed.
Right.
So, do you think it's necessarily a wise way, a smart way to make the rural people, the people on the poverty line, to go to urban to seek opportunities, to make money, to make a better life there?
This was the previous process of development here. But if you look at a province like Henan that's now hit about 4 trillion renminbi in its GDP, this is a landlocked province. And so part of the process of the entire reform here in China and building of the economy has been infrastructure, the connectivity of road systems, rail systems, which are now becoming more efficient and smart. And in this case, it has to be also doubled with education. Because right now, a province like Henan is facing not just the transformation from agriculture to industry, but what industries will be next. We talked about Apple and smartphones. Okay, fine. But now we have to look at new technologies. We have to look at the fact that China is now the single largest investor in the world in artificial intelligence. And with the movement on ecological civilization, how can we be coming up with Chinese-made Xiaomi phones that are solar powered and not wasting so many resources as the Apple phone batteries are? And so this is the kind of opportunity that a province like Henan can have, but it's going to have to involve, again, not only the infrastructure, but the education process. And that is where a lot of investment will have to be, not just in the hardware of an economy, but in the software of the economy as well.
But talking about education, especially in rural areas, it is very important because it involves youth in the process of poverty reduction and development. And youth is actually very much neglected in terms of policy making process. So how much do you think that can be done to improve the education situation in rural areas of China, not only in Henan province, but also in overall China? And of course, the skill trainings of the young people who don't have the opportunity to enter schools.
I think this is one of the outcomes of this past week of the CPC Congress. And that is the idea of not just closing gaps. It's not just words, but it's actually going to be involving national investment in creating, really turning townships and villages into urban areas or into more sophisticated quality living. Because if you don't have those concentrated areas, you're not going to be able to have the foundations for education and for healthcare. And so it's not about having poor farmers migrate to coastal cities. It's about reversing that process and creating the systems and the urban infrastructure and nexus that will allow those migrants to go back and to be part of an internal, within the landlocked provinces, within the Western provinces, of economic development, and a smart economic development. It has to be different. It has to be powered by green grids. And these are the challenges that, again, come right back to education, because a whole new skill set that's going to be required to create what I think has been discussed this past week as ecological cities out of the old, outdated townships and villages.
Very briefly, actually every year now China's education input from central government occupied 4% of China's GDP. That's very high compared with most of developing countries. However, very, very unimbalanced distribution, especially between urban areas and rural areas. So that means in the future we have to increase input in rural areas, for education budget. Second, nowadays, given that in a lot of rural areas, lack of enough teachers, so actually now, if you look at those universities in coastal areas, a lot of young people are encouraged to as a volunteer teacher in those poor regions. I think that's a very effective and rapid approach to change education situation over there. And the third one is that that a lot of poor areas and over there actually in case they want to improve their education situation, social capital and those actually some of people they want to support, maybe they are entrepreneurs or they are businessmen, but they are willing to provide fund to support those education improvement in rural areas. That's also happened in China. So in this regard, I think that we need to have a very comprehensive tools to promote education improvement.
We'll be getting back to you, gentlemen, for more insights. Now, the party has set the goal of building a Xiaokang society. To understand this Chinese terminology, my colleague Jeff Moody explains with more details.
China's most important goal over the next 5 years is to build a society of moderate prosperity, or a Xiaokang society. So what exactly would that look like? Well, first, no one would be left below the poverty line. China would strive to eradicate absolute poverty in the most remote areas, and people would receive guarantees about their livelihoods. A program to promote better living standards in urban areas would cover a wide range of people in need. More students would get third-level education. Healthcare and living conditions would also be improved to benefit more people. Social fairness and justice would be facilitated to guarantee people's fundamental interests. And at the same time, more measures would be taken to tackle environmental problems for bluer skies, a greener earth, and cleaner water. However, the term is not just a catchphrase for today. Back in 1979, the Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping used it for China's modernization drive. Now, to turn China into a country of moderate prosperity, it requires greater advances in the economy, fuller democracy, and progress in science and education.
Right now, let's go to our reporter Nathan King, who is standing by at the delegates corridor in a great hall of people. Hello there, Nathan. Well, this corridor facilitates media interviews with the delegates. What's the general mood like there now? How do you feel?
Well, it's pretty exciting because we haven't really seen the delegates for about a week, have we? And in the next few minutes or so, what we're going to learn is actually the makeup of the new Central Committee. And you can see just behind me here, 1, 2, 3, 4 microphones. So we're expecting at least 4 delegates to come out. Now, why is this so important? Well, the Central Committee, as we know, is the main governing vessel of the Communist Party, but their first job in the next 24 hours is going to go into their first plenum, their first meeting, and then select the Politburo and the Politburo Standing Committee as well, the two highest organs of the Communist Party as well. And what's really exciting about this Central Committee, as we know, is that the composition of the Central Committee is likely to be very different from the last one because of a lot of retirements and resignations. About 70% of the new Central Committee, Central Committee will be actually new members, especially the military component as well. So we're also looking at the makeup of the military commission as well, the disciplinary and committee as well. So all these things are going to happen in the next 24 hours or so. But first of all, we're going to get the lineup of the Central Committee, and that's going to be very important. It'll give us our first snapshot of the Communist Party's new leadership here in China for the next 5 years. I just want to give you a bit of color here. We're in something called the corridor. This is a kind of new thing for the CPC. You probably saw it at the beginning of the opening session. Of course, we're in the closing session today, where they line up these microphones and actually delegates come out and answer questions. It's a bit like a cross between a sort of press stakeout and a sort of red carpet in the West. And what it's given is the media a lot more opportunities than we had in the past to actually talk face to face with the delegates. So it's pretty exciting. I will give you a list as soon as I get it of who's going to come.
Well, Nathan, what would your first question be if you have the chance to ask them questions?
I'm glad you asked that, because I've been thinking about which questions Chinese journalists will ask and which one perhaps the foreign press want to hear. And because we're a global channel, I think, what does this new Central Committee mean for China in the world? How is it going to affect China's policies going out? We saw a lot, of course, from General Secretary Xi Jinping in his speech in the opening session. We'll be hearing more in the closing session, but I'd just like them to put a bit more flesh on the bones of what the party's policy is in terms of Chinese foreign policy going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My colleague Nathan King reporting from the Delegates Corridor in the Great Hall of the People. Well, the 19th CPC National Congress marks a historic juncture for the intensified effort to promote China's growth. Central China's Henan province is in a good geographical spot, like what just introduced, to take advantage of new opportunities. For more on the area's economic prospects, let's go to Meng Qingsheng once again in Henan province. Hello there, Qingsheng. Please tell us more about the outlook for Henan province, the most populous province in the country.
Dongning, currently Henan province has benefited from a number of national policies and programs, which is hoped to lead to a burgeoning economic and social growth in the following years. Last year, the State Council announced plans to build the Central Plains urban agglomeration, which includes 30 cities in Henan, Anhui, and the neighboring provinces, with Henan's Chengdu being the core area. The State Council also launched a program that year aimed at boosting development in the central region for the 13th five-year plan, saying the rise of the region is of great importance to China's medium-high economic growth. For more insight into the province's future growth, I'm joined by Mr. Chen Donghui, Research Fellow from the Henan Academy of Social Sciences. Mr. Chen, can you share with me your vision into the future economic and social development of Henan province?
Could you please talk about the social and economic prospect in Henan province? All right. The future development of Henan province enjoys very bright prospects. Why is that? Because Henan province enjoys distinctive geographical positions. We are located in the central part of China. This is the core area, and we have very good network of transportations connected with all parts of China. We are also building high-speed rail. In the future, if you go to different parts of China, it's going to take you a few hours and a very short of time. We also have very cultural resource base. The cultural industries is going to become the pillar of the national economy. So we have distinctive advantages in developing cultural industries. We also have human resources. We have over 100 million population, and we have ample labor and workforce. More importantly, we have the support from the government strategies, comprising 6 government strategies, for instance, grain production, economic demonstration zones, as well as the free trade zone in Henan province. So these government strategies will give a strong boost to the development in this province. Therefore, in the government work report, we mentioned that we're going to build an economically strong province, both in the hinterland of China. We also need to open up to the rest of the country. General Secretary Xi Jinping said that we also want to build a Silk Road in the air. That means we have to build transport routes in the air. We also have a cross-border e-commerce trading center being built in Henan province. E-commerce is growing very rapidly, accounting for a huge share of the national economy. So we want to sell our goods to the international markets. So e-commerce is going to be very rapid in the future. So we also want to work on different fronts to develop advanced manufacturing, e-commerce, service industry, and modern agriculture. So in all these areas, the government support and the policies will lend a strong boost to our development. General Secretary Xi Jinping paid a visit to Henan province, and he said that to rejuvenate the Chinese nation and realize the Chinese dream, the central region needs to grow further. So we have to play our cards well in 4 areas. For instance, infrastructure, urbanization, things like that. So with the guidance and leadership of the central government, we are bound to achieve greater development in the future.
Thank you very much. That's Chen Xianhui, research fellow from Henan Academy of Social Sciences. We hope that Henan province, with this national policies and project in place, will grow into a big powerhouse in central China. Dongning, back to you.
Thank you very much. I think the model in the most populous province, Henan, in China, will provide a very good experience to the most populous country in the world, which is China. You're now watching our special coverage on the 19th Party Congress. We'll be right back after this.
Every 5 years, the Chinese Communist Party holds its National Congress. This month, the 19th Congress opens in Beijing. It will elect a new central leadership and chart the course for the party as well as the country over the next 5 years and beyond. Who will step into the party's top leadership, the Politburo Standing Committee? Will the Congress look to amend the party constitution? Which direction will the anti-corruption campaign be heading? How will the CPC manage the Chinese economy, foreign affairs, and military? Tune into CGTN for all the answers as the CPC decides.
Welcome back to our special coverage. Now, Chinese State Councillor and Defense Minister Chang Wanquan said on Monday that China is willing to work closely with Southeast Asian countries to forge a community with a shared future and build a safer Asia. Chang is attending the 11th ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting in the Philippines. He told his ASEAN counterparts that China will stick to the principles of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit and inclusiveness. He added that China will actively promote cooperation with ASEAN countries in areas including joint sea drills and counter-terrorism. The 10-nation bloc's defense ministers lauded China's contributions to regional peace and stability and expressed their willingness to strengthen strategic communication and enhance defense cooperation with China. The Rohingya communities across the world are closely watching the crisis unfold in Myanmar as hundreds of thousands flee violence from the northern Rakhine state. Family and friends from abroad are eagerly awaiting information on their loved ones. CGTN's Dan Williams reports from Chicago.
The Rogers Park neighbourhood in the northern suburbs of Chicago is known for its racial diversity. and it is here where the Rohingya Culture Centre is based. The centre's focus is now Myanmar, after hundreds of thousands of ethnic Rohingya were sent fleeing into Bangladesh following a military crackdown that began in late August. The UN describes the situation as the world's fastest developing refugee crisis.
We can forget in our country people. They need help us. They're waiting for us. They cry for us. Help us, help us.
The centre caters to some 1,500 Rohingya living in Chicago's north side and provides English classes to help new arrivals better adjust to life in the US. But for many, their attention remains on the crisis unfolding in Myanmar.
And it is very heartbreaking news we receive every day. I mean, some people are crying here, and even myself, I mean, I'm not able to control my emotion, and because of the sea, what's going on back in the country, small babies and women are raped and elderly men without food.
Children attend a Quran class in the back room of the centre. Roshna is just 10 years old, but she is all too aware of the issues affecting her people.
My dad, he's really worried about his sisters. Like my dad's sisters in Burma, so like they're scared to go outside. And then some children are dying, like their mama are dying, they're alone.
This centre has become a hub for families looking for information on loved ones fleeing the crisis. And in recent weeks, newcomers have been arriving with eyewitness accounts of brutality. Abul Nasser arrived in Chicago with his family 2 weeks ago.
One of my relatives, who was locked down in his house, the military set fire until he died, burnt alive by the military.
The Myanmar government says it's fighting Rohingya militants and denies targeting civilians. Those at the centre disagree. They are now actively lobbying members of the US Congress in hopes of finding a political solution to the crisis. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
Now, in Washington, US President Donald Trump is talking trade deals and security with Singapore's Prime Minister. And the meeting included the signing of a multi-billion-dollar deal between Boeing and Singapore Airlines. Lee is on a 6-day visit to Washington. CGTN's Jessica Stone reports from the White House.
Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and U.S. President Donald Trump sealing their visit here in Washington, D.C. with a major commercial airplane deal to buy 39 Boeing aircraft for Singapore International Airlines. It's going to modernize their fleet. This is a $13.8 billion deal and is supposed to help Singapore International Airlines compete with other airlines in China and the Middle East. Take a listen to the CEOs at the signing.
We're very happy to be here today to celebrate the signing of 20 777-9s and 19 787-10 Boeing aircraft.
Thanks, and we are very proud also to be the launch customer for the 787-10.
And that Boeing deal expected to create 70,000 U.S. jobs. There's also a lot of conversation between these two leaders about the DPRK nuclear issue, and they will continue that conversation in the region at the APEC Economic Summit as well as the U.S.-ASEAN Summit. You know, Singapore is going to be next year's host for ASEAN. This visit is going to include comprehensive visits to Vietnam, to Philippines, to the ROK, where there's a state visit, as well as to China, where there is also a state visit, and Japan. But a key feature of this is quite a few interactions between President Xi and Jinping of China and President Trump of the United States. Their first face-to-face meeting in China, and of course coming on the heels of the 19th Party Congress. This will be an opportunity for President Xi to talk more about his priorities coming out of the Congress, about the way forward on the DPRK and on the way forward with climate change. Singapore's Prime Minister here at the White House telling President Trump that he would be watching very closely to see what comes out of their interactions, particularly on the DPRK nuclear issue. Take a listen.
Singapore, like many other countries, watch your relations with China very closely. It's the most important bilateral relationship in the world. I express my hope that the U.S. will be able to maintain a stable and constructive relationship with China.
Now, Prime Minister Lee has also repeatedly condemned the DPRK nuclear program for being a dangerous provocation, but he said to President Trump on Monday that, quote, pressure is necessary, but so is dialogue. Jessica Stone, CGTN at the White House.
Now, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson paid a surprise visit to Afghanistan on Monday to discuss with Afghan officials Washington's new strategy in the continuing war there. It was his first trip to Afghanistan as a Secretary of State and comes several weeks after U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis also paid an unannounced visit. Tillerson's visit follows one of the bloodiest weeks in Afghanistan in recent memory, and more than 200 people were killed in multiple attacks on security installations and mosques across the country. And Russia is calling on the Iraqi Kurds to work with the government in Baghdad. Russia's foreign minister delivered the messages as he met with his Iraqi counterpart in Moscow. The meeting comes amid heightened tensions after the Iraqi military took the oil-rich city of Kirkuk from Kurdish forces. CGTN's Juliet Lyubova reports.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow respects the desire of Iraqi Kurdistan to assert its identity. However, he said this must be done in dialogue with the Iraqi government.
We confirmed the position of the Russian side in favor of resolving all the problems between the Iraqi government and the leadership of the Kurdish autonomy through constructive, respectful dialogue on the basis of the unity and territorial integrity of Iraq.
It comes after Sergei Lavrov held a meeting with his Iraqi government counterpart in Moscow on Monday. Lavrov said that Kurdistan must realize its independence hopes exclusively via the Iraqi government, taking into account the need to avoid additional sources of instability in the region. Lavrov also said that Moscow would continue its economic ties with Iraqi Kurdistan. Russia's oil giant Rosneft has recently agreed to take over Iraqi Kurdistan's main oil pipeline. Relations between Iraqi Kurdistan and the central government in Baghdad have reached a crisis level after Kurdistan held an independence referendum last month. Julia Lyubova, CGTN, Moscow.
Well, Madrid has threatened to impose direct rule on the autonomous region of Catalonia, and that will require a Senate vote on Friday. The Catalan Parliament is set to debate its next move, and regional parties are meeting on Thursday. Madrid believes a vote for independence may be taken at that time. A far-left Catalan party is calling for protests to block the removal of the region's leaders. CGTN's Stephanie Fried reports from Barcelona.
We will not take orders from Spain. That is the word on Monday from the Catalonian Parliament, namely from the Foreign Minister, Raúl Romeva, who says those aren't his words or the Parliament's words. That's the choice of the people, and that's in reference to an October 1st referendum where the people of Catalonia voted for independence from Spain. Well, on the heels of that referendum, these announcements are coming, and that was October 1st, and a lot has transpired since and will continue to transpire this week. Here are some of the highlights of what we're expecting to happen this week. On Wednesday, Catalonian President Carles Puigdemont will be in Madrid, where he's expected to appeal Article 155. That's an article that was handed down by the Spanish Prime Minister on Saturday. It would essentially strip this area of its autonomy. So he's going to appeal it on the grounds of, apparently, that it's illegal. On Thursday, and could mean that Spain's central government takes control of police, of finances, of media, and on and on. What's the response here on the ground? Well, first of all, tourism is responding. It's down by 17 to 20% over last year. Also, there is speculation here more than fear. People don't know what will happen in the future, and that's what they're asking. What will happen economically? What's going to happen to them in terms of independence? What will happen to their freedoms? Last but not least, there are concerns of violence on the streets if the Spanish central government moves in, takes control. But I was talking with an analyst earlier in the day. He said he does not expect for Spain to send in, quote unquote, its heavies, meaning the national police. And that's because, according to this analyst, he doesn't think that the Spanish government will make the same mistake twice. And that's in reference to violent images that we saw come out of that October 1st referendum, images of police going head-to-head with people who were trying to vote. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Barcelona.
Now, a big election win for the Argentina's President Mauricio Macri. His center-right coalition scored a major victory in Sunday's midterm polls. CGTN's Joe Richards has this story.
This has become a familiar sight when it comes to Argentina's election nights in recent years. Celebrations led by Mauricio Macri's trademark dance. 2 years after winning the presidency, Macri strengthened his position across the country in Sunday's midterm elections.
We realized that many things can change. We realized that we were encouraged by change. We overcame fear and resignation, and reality accompanied us and is accompanying us.
The centre-right coalition Let's Change won the 5 largest provinces and took 41% of the vote nationwide. Analysts like Mariano Vila says this represents a cultural shift.
In this election, the first difference is that we are thinking in a new Argentina. For that reason, this election is very important, not only for the government, for the Argentina in general, like a country.
These election results essentially give the government the green light to move ahead with a series of reforms across key areas. On Monday morning, President Mauricio Macri outlined his priorities for the second half of this term in office. With a stronger presence in Congress, Macri's government will now focus on reforming taxes as well as education and labour legislation. The elections had been overshadowed by the disappearance of activist Santiago Maldonado, whose body was identified on Friday. There was widespread indignation and there were accusations of a government cover-up. Awaiting the full autopsy report, authorities say it appears he drowned and there was no sign of violence. But just as crucial to these elections was the fate of former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, who was running for senator in the Buenos Aires province. She was defeated by the government's candidate.
The government has been able to capitalize on a majority of citizens who feel strongly against the ex-president. This let the government gain good results not only in the capital, where the ex-president was a candidate, but also across the country.
Nevertheless, Fernández de Kirchner will have a seat in the Senate, which gives her immunity against corruption charges. In her return to the political stage, it's expected she will help opposition efforts against government reforms, austerity measures and tariff hikes, which Argentines began to feel on Monday when the cost of fuel increased by 12%. Joel Richards, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
Now, a national census carried out in Peru on Sunday is being widely questioned over a series of irregularities. CGTN's Dan Collins from Lima has more details.
This was the first ever census here that asked Peruvians how they identify themselves ethnically. But the day after the census was carried out in urban areas, there are widespread claims that the census takers did not reach everyone, even in the capital city. Officials from the National Statistics Institute say 2 to 3% of these Peruvians have yet to be surveyed. But some observers say that the real figure is much higher. Officials admit they underestimated the huge numbers of people living on Lima's periphery, particularly in rented rooms or shanty towns. What's more, one entire district in a dangerous drug-producing area was omitted for security reasons. Census takers will begin working there this week under military protection. Several census takers said they were assaulted as they made their rounds, and one woman reported being raped. Her alleged attacker was arrested. There's also controversy that a university owned by a former presidential candidate, Cesar Cunha, sponsored the census and could have privileged access to the information, sparking accusations of a conflict of interest. Officials say they will need 2 weeks to get to all of the more than 31 million Peruvians in the country, some of whom live in remote areas in the Amazon jungle or the Andes Mountains. Gathering this information about population, employment, as well as socioeconomic data was clearly more difficult than anticipated. But some experts have said that it was overly optimistic to try and complete the census in one day, pointing out the process can take months in other countries. Dan Collins, CGTN, Lima.
Welcome back to our special coverage on the CPC's National Congress. Now, China is now playing a bigger role in the global stage. Its global impact has now appealed to more and more foreigners to stay in China to fulfill their dreams. Our reporters Xu Zhaoxun, John Terrett and Lindy Matgongana went to interview several of them currently living in Beijing. They shared their thoughts with us now.
Hi everybody, John Terrett here, New York correspondent for CGTN. I'm in Beijing at the moment, taking part in our station's coverage of the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. We're here on the 26th floor of the big CGTN building in downtown Beijing. And with me is Lindy Matgongana, who is an anchor with our Nairobi division in Africa, and our old and very dear friend, Mr. Xu, who is the senior correspondent here, who's in charge of all the correspondence that the company has all the way across China. So welcome to you both. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you, John.
The idea of Monday on CGTN is China and how it influences people in the rest of the world. So Lindy and Mr. Xu and I have all made films and met people who have a story to tell you about how China has influenced their lives. Now, in my case, I went to China Radio International, which is in the west of the city, and the station broadcasts on shortwave all the way around the world. It's amazing. They broadcast in so many languages. And they also broadcast here in Beijing on medium wave and on FM. Well, Jessica Law works for them in their marketing department. She handles the online marketing. And she's been here from America, where she was born, for about 5 or 6 years now. So I asked her why she lives in Beijing when, as an American citizen, she could live back home in the United States. Take it up. So Jessica, you're an American citizen. You could live in any of the cities over there, New York, San Francisco, New Orleans, and yet you choose to live here in Beijing and have for some time. Why is that?
Well, really, I don't think I could live in any other city because I think, honestly, Beijing does provide a lot of not only opportunities, but it's such a developing city right now. There's so much growth here that I really want to get in on the action. And so New York, it's a great city. You know, they say if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But I would really say that about Beijing or Shanghai. You know, if you can make it here, you really can make it anywhere, especially with different languages.
So what kind of opportunities have you been presented with here in China, Beijing in particular, that you wouldn't have had you stayed at home?
When I first came to China, I thought it was just going to be for a very short period of time, maybe a vacation. And really, it just kept developing. I got so many job opportunities that I never would have found in any other place.
Such as?
When I first came here, I wanted to teach English, and then I started finding that I could import red wine from California to here. I got my own TV show for a travel show. I met people that I would have never met in the United States, so many people from all around the world, and just so many opportunities.
And you met your husband.
I did. I actually, last year, I got married to a Beijinger. And so we are very happy. I'm so excited to actually be here, one of the reasons I'm in Beijing, but also because Beijing, it's a bigger platform. It offers me a lot of job opportunities and just a lot of opportunities in general. It's a very happening city.
So what kind of things do you do in a happening city, you two? How do you entertain yourselves?
There's a lot to do. First of all, something I love about Beijing is that, first of all, I can have anything delivered to my door. I don't have to go outside if I don't want to. But if I do, I can actually go to any kind of restaurants. There are restaurants and bars within walking distance, no matter where you live in Beijing. That's the best part. And it's very convenient to get everywhere. It's one of my favorite things. And so I really appreciate living here where there's so much convenience, especially on apps that you can use. And to be honest, I love China's shared bicycles and their mobile pay. That's something you really can't do in New York. Not yet, anyway. So it's something I really enjoy doing here.
That's Jessica's story. Now, you've been meeting a comedian, I gather.
Very interesting man indeed. His name is Francis Chiege, and he comes from Cameroon originally. He actually has a PhD in mathematics. And at a certain point in his life, he had been a journalist as well. He actually used to work at a radio station hosting a classical music show. And then an opportunity came for him to either sort of stay on and continue with work or carry on teaching mathematics as he was doing, or take a scholarship opportunity in China, and that's what he chose to do. That was back in 2003, and now, 14 years later, he's quite a well-known television personality and he's really made a life for himself here in China, speaks the language fluently, and for him it really is a second home. Here's his story.
Let's take a look.
It's reasonably uncommon to see an African face in Beijing, but as China opens its doors to the world, a growing number of African expats are choosing to call China home.
Hi, Lindy. How are you?
With a PhD in hand, he arrived from Cameroon to study aeronautics. 14 years later, he's mastered Mandarin, absorbed Chinese culture, and is now a sought-after performer on the national entertainment scene. Known as Jia Gai to Chinese audiences, Francis is famous for his performances of Chinese crosstalk, a stand-up comedy routine dubbed xiangsheng. He's also gained recognition for hosting and performing in a variety of Chinese talent and talk shows.
The fact that I put effort in studying Chinese language seriously, honestly, this fact opened millions of doors for me.
Over the years, Francis has gained a keen appreciation for China's growth and development path. He believes there are many key lessons for Africa.
China, just a couple of decades ago, was far behind many countries in the world. Look nowadays, how China has been fighting, improving, and growing and growing. And from this perspective, I would say, how about us?
Though Cameroon will always be his first love, Francis quite comfortably considers China home.
So that's Francis' story. And Mr. Xu, who have you been meeting?
Okay, I met two very interesting people. One is from Malaysia and the other one is from India. The Malaysian girl has been in China for 7 years. She did her master's degree in China and she has been working here for quite a few times. She told me some stories which is very interesting about durian, a fruit in the tropical countries.
Now this is the smelly one.
Yes,
but
yes,
it tastes very good.
Yes, exactly. The other one is an Indian businessman who speaks perfect Chinese. She also did her degrees in China, been doing business for years, and she told me some tricks in doing business with Chinese people. Okay, let's take a look at the story.
Take a look and see.
Kare has been living in China the past 8 years, ever since she got a master's degree in Beijing. She said she can clearly feel the changes in China within the last few years.
China, since the opening of it, the open door policy and everything like that, it's interesting to see the changes that is happening here. It's very drastic. So throughout the 7 years I've been here, it has changed so much that you could hardly imagine if I stayed in Malaysia. So I would say that recently what happened is when I went back to Malaysia and then I craved for durian, the king of fruit. So this time when I went back, I asked my parents and then they said, oh, we don't get much of durian these days and the quality is not that good anymore. I was like, why? It's like most of the good ones are already exported to China these days, and the price escalates a lot. It's very expensive to eat durian these days.
This might not be something bad.
Spending power is different because the spending power in China has escalated a lot over the years. I used to buy meat for maybe 14 kwai for 500 grams, and now I'm paying for 20 to 30 kwai for 500 grams, which is almost doubled within these few years. So it's like the spending power has increased. I mean, the salary has increased a lot too.
Living in the same district with Ankara is Subrajit, a successful Indian businessman who speaks fluent Chinese, and he seems to know China even better.
China is right now, I think it is pretty aggressive in expanding its market. For this, I think China, this Gautier system, the bullet train system, this is a tremendous advancement for China, inside China. Two economies, such big economies, and two Asian giants just from the other side of the Himalayas. It's on the other side. So it's a very big opportunity. I think both the countries should take the this opportunity, grab this opportunity. If they come together, I think we make more than 35% of the entire world population together.
Yes, exactly.
So if we can come together, I think the potential is immense. You see, right now, Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, he has the plan that Make in India. It is a very good plan, but it needs to be complemented with some sort of policies. These policies, we might be able to learn or study China very well. Once we study this process, because China is also having a huge population pressure, so is India. So if we can study those process, it will be better implemented in India.
Xu Prajit is not satisfied with his current achievements and is planning to expand his business in the near future.
Right, let's broaden the discussion out a little bit now, just to talk about our country's relationship with China. Well, we broadcast on a Chinese television station every day. I mean, you go first, Lindy. What do you think is the relationship between China and your part of Africa, which is in the east?
Yes, well, of course, I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and you don't have to go far to see the influence or the presence of China in Kenya. I'm sure you're both very familiar with one of the biggest projects that's ever happened on the African continent, which was the standard gauge railway that was built by China and delivered to Mombasa.
You're now watching our special coverage on the CPC's National Congress. The 19th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China were elected at the closing session of the 19th CPC National Congress. And also the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China has also elected the 19th CPC Central Commission for Discipline Inspection. We'll keep you updated on the information released by the closing session of the 19th CPC Party Congress. Now let's go back to our studio guests for more discussion into China's new contradiction. We're going to talk about this concept mainly today. Well, Lawrence, earlier we talked about what the new contradictions mean to every Chinese. What does it mean to the world? China has new contradictions. What about the world? What are the major contradictions in the world?
Well, first of all, let's look at the CPC Congress, because this is really the first Congress where the main focus has not been only on China's domestic internal reforms or managing growth or how to cut back growth. It's really been about China's integration and interaction with the world, because the global arena has changed very dramatically.
In what way?
Well, first of all, let's look at we have the rise of Donald Trump. We have an America that itself is facing huge contradictions, huge divisions, not necessarily.
What does the rise of Donald Trump mean? I mean, we not only have seen the rise of Donald Trump, we also see the rise of the sentiment of like Brexit, like the separatisms of Kurds, like Catalonian.
But these are all different issues, and I think we shouldn't bunch them together. What we have happening in the United States right now is we have a lot of division within the country. People are very tired of a lot of the policies, and at the same time they don't understand what has happened in the country. You have a situation where America's overextended its reach militarily throughout the world. It has engaged in regime changes in a number of places like Libya. It has, the entire, military expansionism. At the same time, Xi and the party Congress is taking a different approach at how China will interact with the world. It's not going to be about interfering. They made it very clear, not interfering in other countries, that you don't understand the situation. In his speech, he even said, sometimes interference in cultures that are complex, where you don't understand what's happening, lead to really negative results, as we have seen. So it's really now looking at the China solution. What is that solution? It is about infrastructure. It is about trying to build up economic bandwidths that allow people to have their own self-empowerment.
Sorry, we had to leave our discussion there and go to the Great Hall of People to see what is going on there. General Secretary Xi Jinping is delivering a speech.
The resolution of the report delivered to the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. The 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China regarding the draft resolution of the work of 18th National Congress, and it approved that the General Secretary Xi Jinping delivered the report, uphold the high banner of the socialist community with the Chinese characteristics, maintain the Marxism and Leninism theory, the three represents, and the Deng Xiaoping theory and the Mao Zedong theory, and we review the achievements in the past 5 years and the historical changes, and create socialists with Chinese characteristics for a new era. And we seek happiness for the Chinese people, and we realize the great contradiction between the unbalanced and inadequate development and ever-growing needs for a better life, and we reaffirm the position of Xi Jinping's new vision and theory and strategy of the future direction, and start to embark on the new journey to build a moderate prosperity society in all respects and realize a modern socialist country in the future. And it place the great importance and the plan for the future plan to secure a decisive victory in building a moderately prosperous society in all respects, and strive for the great success of socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, and also lay out the future direction and plan for the party and the nation. It crystallizes the wisdom of all the delegates, the country and the people. It reflects the people's belief and action plan in realizing the direction, and also reflects the Marxism in Chinese context. The report realizes and show the great importance for the future development. We will uphold high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics. We will win the new battle to realize the national dream of rejuvenation. The Congress speaks highly of the work of the 18th National Congress. It was extraordinary achievements made in the past 5 years. In the past 5 years, with the leadership, under the leadership with General Secretary Xi Jinping at its core, it showed and assumed the responsibility and initiated all sets of new series, visions, strategies, plans, and also taken whole important measures and actions to solve the issues that's on the waiting list for a long time, and solve things and problems that have been waited for a long time, and create a historic changes. The leadership with General Secretary Xi Jinping at its core, they shouldered and faced the biggest challenges and solved the prominent difficulties within the party. And they take tougher steps in the battle against corruption and solve the risks intra-party, and bring the new morals to the party, and bring a fresh environment to the party, and increase the party capability and building. The whole party is unified and increasing the relations within the party, and the whole party is more decisive to create a new chapter and be more energetic. This guarantee a strong foundation for future development. This is the changes in the past 5 years was fundamental and profound. With a long time efforts, the socialism society entered into a new chapter, and this is a new chapter for the country. And the great contradiction right now already shifted to the people's ever-growing demand for a better life and the unbalanced and adequate development. This contradiction also sets the new tones and requirements for the work of the party and the country. On this basis, we should focus more on how to solve this great contradiction and increase the higher quality of development in order to fulfill people's requirements on economic development, cultural, environmental protection, in order to make the whole and a new progress in the years to come. In order to answer the question of what kind of socialist with Chinese characteristics we want to achieve and how we achieve it, the party standing at the new vision and on the pattern of the socialism with Chinese characteristics and the party's work, we create a new result as the theory on building the socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. This theory is built on the Marxism and Leninism theory, and also bring the Marxism to the Chinese context. It's also the experience and the wisdom of the whole party and the nation. It also reflects and be an important part of to realizing the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation, and it's also the action plan for the whole society and the party. We should continue to stick to this theory and bring into more actions. We put people centered, and we keep this philosophy, we keep the new vision, strategy for development. Let the people decide their future, and we stick to the law-based governance, and we seek to improve people's standards while development, and we maintain the national security and also support the party's absolute control over the military and concede to one country, two system, and seek to realize the strict party governance as well as to realize the basic principles to build this socialism with Chinese characteristics. So all the members of the party should follow all these directions and to guide their work. By 2020 is the decisive stage to build a moderately prosperous society in all respects. We should, based on the 16th, 17th, and 18th National Congress guidelines and requirements, to increase our weakness lines and also avoid the risks and increase the ecological civilization and increase the poverty alleviation, should stand and against the test of time. This is right now happen at a critical time. We should realize the first goal of two centenary goals. On the other hand, we should also moving forward to embark a new journey towards the second centenary goal. Against the backdrop of international and domestic environment, and from 2020 to the mid-21st century, we can take two measures. From 2020 to 2035, we will fight for another 15 years on the basis of moderately prosperous society in all respects, and to create a more modern society. And we will fight for another additional 15 years to make China be a moderate and a modern society that is prosperous, open, democratic, and beautiful. The party approves the plans to further developed in 5 sphere strategies and want to build up the market-based economies, make sure we put the quality and efficiency on the focus, and we also work to increase the driver effect shifting as well as to bring the economy increase in a more high-quality way.
We will also build market-based mechanisms to revitalize the economy and pursue macroprudential economic policies to add vitality into the economy. We will deepen the structural reform on the supply side and build an innovative economy. We will also rejuvenate the rural area and pursue a balanced approach to economic growth. We will pursue a market-based approach to open up the economy and open up new vistas in improving quality and efficiency and equality and sustainability of the economy. We have to build a system in which our people decide on the future of the country and exercise absolute leadership of the party, rule of law, and all the important links in the system to build a society based on consultative politics and institutional reform. We will also strengthen the United Patriotic Front and build a stable political environment. We also need to show up the confidence in the socialist culture. We will strictly follow the ideology of the socialist country and exercise and observe the core socialist values. We will also add vitality into the cultural undertakings of the society and spur the innovation and creativity of the society. We will improve the living standards of the people, revamp social governance systems, and address the concerns of our people. We will prioritize education, improve job creation, and the income level of our people. We will also strengthen the social security net and win the battle against poverty and jointly build a shared social structure and fabric for the people. By doing so, we can make sure that the security and the sustainability of the society will be improved. We will also continue to build ecological civilization with green development, address prominent environmental problems, and preserve our ecology. We will also improve the environmental governance systems to maintain harmony between man and nature in a modern society. The National Congress emphasized that with the changes in the international environment, we have to strengthen the defense of the country and enhance the military capabilities of the country. We will continue to build a strong land-based military, the Navy and the Air Force, and improve the efficiency of the coordinated defense strategies with Chinese characteristics. We will comprehensively promote the modernization of the army and the armed forces so that we can build a world-class military force in the world. We will continue to support the prosperity of Hong Kong and Macau SAR, and we will also give autonomy to the 2 SARs. And we will also exercise strictly the rights and interests of the people in the 2 SARs based on the basic law. We will continue to follow the one country, two systems principle, promote cross-strait exchanges and communication, and facilitate the peace and development on both sides of the Taiwan Straits. We will allow no organization, individuals, or parties to resort to any means to cede the Chinese territory. We also approved the assessment of the international environment. China will continue to follow the peaceful development approach. We will uphold peace, shared development, and mutual benefit. We will promote mutual development and common interests in our diplomacy. Based on the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, we will continue to promote friendship with different countries and facilitate the development of the Belt and Road Initiative in participating in international governance. We will continue to promote justice, mutual respect, and win-win results in the international relations. In doing so, we will build a common community of shared interests and shared future for mankind so that we can achieve openness, prosperity, and beauty in the world. The National Congress emphasized that we have to be strong enough to fight against corruption, and this is a lofty mission. In order to achieve the goals, we have to improve the leadership of the party and make our party stronger and better in the future. In a new era, in building the party, we will continue to exercise the leadership of the party, exercise strong discipline, and improve the capabilities of the party and fight corruption. We will remain true to the missions and ideals of the party and give initiative to the party members to pursue innovation. We will comprehensively improve political and institutional mechanisms to improve the work style of the party members. Anti-corruption will be continued, and we will make sure that the party can be moving ahead along with the times and deal with all kinds of challenges and difficulties following the Marxist approach. Political building and capacity development is the basis. We have to follow a macro view and exercise authority of the Central Committee, follow the path of the party, and exercise strong discipline. We have to remain true to the principles, roadmap of the party, and align ourselves with the leadership of the party. The Congress called upon people of all groups in the country to rally around the party with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core, to hold high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics, to study the message and the thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. We have to work harder to promote modernization of the country, reunification of the country, and peace and development of the international community, which are the historical missions bestowed upon all of us. And by doing so, we will achieve victory in building a socialist country that is prosperous and strong, and we will also meet the growing demands of our people for a better life.
Now it's for the vote. If you agree, please raise your hand. Please raise your hands if you disagree. None. 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 No disagrees. Please raise your hand if you give up your vote. None. It's approved, the work report. Now, let's come to the third item on the agenda. To approve the work report proposed by the Central Commission of Discipline Inspection. Please read out the draft resolution. To the 19th CPC Central Committee regarding the work report proposed by the Central Commission of Discipline Inspection. The 19th National Congress deliberate and approved the work report. The party fully affirmed the work made by the CCDI. The Congress believes that after the 18th National CPC Congress, under the leadership with General Secretary Xi Jinping at its core, the CCDI worked closely with all levels of discipline inspections. They think in the big picture and keep in alignment, hold the leadership core, and they feel confidence in the systems, in the institution, in culture, and they always keep in alignment with the Central Committee, and they fully follow the party constitution, and they develop themselves and also make the sweeping victory against corruption. They firmly safeguard the leadership of the Central Committee, and they are the fundamental of further development of the party, and they make the party cleaner and purified, and they give a good result of their work in the course of the 5 years. The party also asked to the CCDI to stick to the Mao Zedong theory, the Marxism and Leninism, Mao Zedong's thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, the thought of three represent a scientific outlook on development, as well as the series of important remarks and the new governance concepts, and stick to the direction laid out by the 19th Congress. And they will also stick to the 5 sphere strategies and the 4-pronged plans. And they should stick to be confident, and they should remember their original aspirations and follow the leadership core. And they should keep their work in fighting against corruption and increase the moral standards and make the party healthier. And they will take the shoulders that's regulated by the party constitution in order to secure a decisive victory in building a moderately prosperity society in all respects, and striving for the great success of socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, and work to realize the dream of rejuvenation. Now, time to vote. If you agree, pass, please raise your hand. If you disagree with the report, please raise your hand. None? None. If you give up your vote, please raise your hand. None. None. So the work report by CCDI is approved. Now come to the 4th item on the agenda, to approve an amendment to the CPC Constitution. Please read out the draft resolution. To the 19th CPC National Congress regarding an amendment to the CPC Constitution. The 19th National Congress deliberated and approved the amendment to the CPC constitutions proposed by the 18th National Congress, and it becomes into effect at the approval day. Represented by President and General Secretary Xi Jinping, they bring the theory and the practice together and answer the questions how to build and what kind of socialism with Chinese characters China wants. And they create the important concept, thoughts, and strategy for a new era. So this is bring the Marxism and Leninism, Mao Zedong's thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, the thought of three represents, and the scientific outlook on development into the new context. It's also the new result of Marxism, and it's also the crystallization of wisdom of the party and the society. It have the far-reaching importance. It also the action plan to realize the Chinese dream of rejuvenation. We should stick to it for the years to come. Under the new governance concepts, thoughts, and strategies proposed by General Secretary Xi Jinping, we should stick and create and achieve our goals in great course projects and bring the society and the party into the new era. And we bring the Xi Jinping's theories to the guidance of Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong's thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, the important thought of three represents, and scientific outlook on development as the important guidelines. So all these guidelines will guide our work, and we should study and learn from these reports and remarks, and the Xi's thoughts for the new eras should reflect to all aspects of party building. A party belief it is important to build a socialism with Chinese characteristics. It also encourage the party, people from all ethnic groups to forge ahead. So the party decided we should bring the culture of socialism closely linked with the socialist institution mechanism, and we should bring all of them into the party constitution in order to increase the public awareness and enrich the content of the party. The members of the party should cherish and continue to carry on the hard-achieved culture, mechanism, and institution. We will hold high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics and keep confidence in the theories, in culture, in institution and mechanism. Stick to the general directions and guidelines in order to realize the national dream of rejuvenation. This is the greatest dream for the party, for the society. Is also our solemn commitment to the people, to the country. In the report, we say we will realize the two centenary goals and also realize the dream of national rejuvenation. The proposal delivered by the 18th National Congress is that great contradiction has been shifted between the unbalanced and inadequate development and ever-growing needs for a better life. This is the reality, and we should also based on this to lay out our future action plans, and the party constitution actually amended based on this reality. And we should bring the features and realities into the party constitution and our daily work. A party believes that we should put people in our center. We should keep more innovative, green, open, and shared concept for development. We should achieve the building a moderately prosperous society in all respects, should practice strict party governance, rule of law. All of these is the basic goal, a theory or plan in order to achieve a bright future. In order to make our development in a higher speed and a higher quality, we should stick to the socialist mechanism and increase the party building and capability into a modern level. We should work and develop in a coordinated way, and all these already brought into the party constitutions, and the decision making by the party should also base all these factors in order to create more new chapters. After the 18th National Congress, with the leadership under General Secretary Xi Jinping, we laid out the new thoughts, concepts, and strategies. We will play a bigger role to the market-based economies and keep working on the supply-side reform and to increase the lawful governance, and also increase in institution well-organized manner, and also carry on the tradition excellence and to do more in the innovative way to our development, and increase our soft power in culture, and increase the ideology education, and increase people's gains, sense of gains and fulfillment, and increase the national defense, and also stick to the concept of lucid mountain and lucid waters, and lush mountains are invaluable assets. So all the members of parties should stick to these guidelines, directions, and plans. We should stick to the 5-sphere strategies. These have far-reaching importance. The Congress believes after the 18th National Congress, General Secretary Xi Jinping made a great effort in the United Front, in the foreign affairs, as well as party buildings. We stick to building a greater China and powerful enemies, and we improve the relations and make a reunified of the country.
The National Congress realized that the CPC will continue to exercise leadership over the army and the defense team. We will improve the political ideology of the army and exercise rule of law in governing the army, so that our army is well prepared to win battles in the future. We will make sure that the PLA will continue to follow the mission for the new future. We will also follow the correct leadership of the party and try to build a community of shared future for mankind. We will promote the establishment of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is written into the party constitution. These efforts will promote the leadership of the military and the army, promote modernization of the military, and improve the cohesiveness and unity of our people. The National Congress proposed that since the 18th National Congress, the party worked hard to improve the governance of the party. We have made very important achievements and built a lot of experiences. And these should be reflected in the party constitution so that they can be translated into the ideology and the ethos of the party members. The party will exercise strict discipline over the members and make sure that the party is advanced and incorruptible. We will improve the political ideology of the party, the institutional work style, as well as the ethos of the party. We will continue to fight against corruption. We will ceaselessly seek improvement in terms of our capacity and ideology. The Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era will be incorporated into the macro planning of the party. We will strictly follow the leadership and the authority of the party with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core. We will also improve the party members' political life so that the members can keep abreast of the times and move ahead with innovative ideas. We will improve the incorruptible environment within the party. Strict discipline and rigorous governance will be exercised as a premise in improving party building. And these efforts will make the party mission clearer. And this is instrumental to guiding the party members to promote party building and improve the capabilities and vitality of the party on the whole. The National Congress mentioned that the party leadership is the fundamental feature of Chinese socialist institution, and it is also the biggest advantage of our institution. The party leads everything in the country, and the party as the absolute leader will be written into the Constitution. So the philosophical and political unity within the party will be strengthened to improve the creativity and the capabilities of the party members. We will unite all resources and all forces from the society to serve as a political safeguard for our country. The National Congress mentioned that we will build on the experiences we have gained since the 18th National Congress, improve the amendments, and make revisions to the relevant clauses in the party constitution. We will continue to study and observe the message of Comrade Xi Jinping on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, address those problems in violation of the party constitution, observe socialist core values, and the virtue of the socialist country. This is part of our commitment. We will put our people at first, and we will also implement comprehensive inspections in the party. We have to follow the principles of the party in fighting corruption, and the chairman will be held responsible for the military and also the party anti-corruption campaigns. The reformed military commission will adjust its principles and strategies to fit the new circumstances. The tenure will also be adjusted, and relevant institutions will be made permanent. Grassroots party organizations will also have a clearer functions to play. Grassroots party organizations and party committees will recruit high-caliber talents, enrich the content of the discipline inspection work. This will make sure that everything that we have achieved since the 18th National Congress will be written into the party constitution, and this will guide the future work of the party. We will also make sure that the Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era will serve as the beacon for the work of the party in improving party governance and building. The National Congress required that all party members should rally around the Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core, uphold the great banner of Chinese socialism with our characteristics, and observe Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, and three represents, and also follow the Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. We have to observe the party constitution and the principles, safeguard the leadership and authority of the party, exercise self-governance, and win a decisive victory on building a Xiaokang society and a moderately prosperous society in all respects. And in this way, we will achieve our Chinese dream of national rejuvenation and meet the growing demands of our people for a better life. Now let's put the resolution to vote. Those who agree, please raise your hand. Those who disagree, please raise your hand. None? 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 Those who abstinate, please raise your hand. None? 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 No abstention. The resolution is adopted. Dear comrades, the 19th CPC National Congress has concluded and finished all the items on its agenda. Thanks to the joint efforts of all party members, the 19th CPC National Congress has remained true to its original mission and ideal, upheld the banner of socialism, and united people across the country. The report of the 18th CPC Central Committee upheld the Chinese characteristics and socialism with our characteristics, followed Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, the thought on three represents, the scientific concept of development, and the socialism on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. We analyzed the domestic and international circumstances and dynamics. We reviewed the achievements we have made in the past 5 years and some of the developments we have observed. We elaborated on the historical mission of the CPC in a new era. We proposed that the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era should be adopted with new principles and strategies. We have confirmed our strategies to build a moderately prosperous society in all respects and a modernized new China. This is very important for promoting the development of socialist China and also party building in the future. It has served as guidance and charted the course for the party and the country. The report pulls together the wisdom of people across the country. It will rally the party members and people from across the country in following socialism with Chinese characteristics. It is a guide to action. The report of the Commission for Discipline Inspection has summarized the work made by the 18th CCDI and has recognized the achievements made by discipline inspection authorities at different levels under the leadership of the central government. We have conducted in-depth anti-corruption campaigns and left no stones unturned in following the principles and policies of the central government. We have improved the discipline of the party. We have promoted the implementation of self-governance within the party at different levels. We have improved our inspectional mechanism for discipline, which is put at the top of the agenda. We will stem the flow and spread of corruption and purify the environment within the party. We have strengthened and developed our campaign in fighting against corruption. The amendment adopted to the party constitution has reflected the innovation in theory and practice since the 18th National Congress, and important results have been reflected in this report. This demonstrates that important theoretical progress and strategic thinking we have proposed along the way. It shows the achievements and experiences we have made in building the party. It is critical in improving the leadership of the party, strengthening the self-governance of the party, and has charted the course for our future work.
The National Congress has already voted the new Central Committee, and it realized the leadership shifting, and we also have the new CCDI. We have every reason to believe that the decision made by the National Congress and the achievements we made are conducive to build a moderately prosperous society in all respects and to embark the new journey to a great modern society country, to increase the party's self-governance, rule of law, and it also has far-reaching importance to realize national rejuvenation. And this is a very important guidelines. As the delegates of the party, it's our great honor, but we also shoulder more responsibilities. We should always keep in mind the party's original aspirations and always remembered our assumed responsibilities. Keep learning and understanding the party's general directions and action plans. And implement the Central Committee's direction in building a moderately prosperous society and a moderate society. We should learn and implement and safeguard the party constitution and keep in alignment with Central Committee. And the party members should also work closely with other party members and societies and reflect their feedbacks and suggestions in a timely manner, and also under the supervision and inspection by the whole society. You should play as a leading and exemplary role. Always follow and improve your self-capability, and also be more active in practicing the socialist principle and contribute your wisdom and efforts. Don't let people down, and you should response to their trust in you.
各民主党派中央、全国工商联
During the National Congress, all the related institutions and people from different ethnic groups extend their warm congratulations to the opening of the National Congress, and the whole society also extend their congratulations to the parties. And also the leaders from other countries and institutions also made phone calls to the parties, and we would like to thank for their long-term support.
同志们
Dear comrades,
中国共产党已经成立96年了。
it marks the 96th anniversary of the founding of CPC and also the 68th anniversary of China. And we also conducted the reform and opening up for 39 years.
我们党团结带领全国人民
The party
中华民族不懈奋斗
lead the whole society, and we work tirelessly to
鸦片战争以后
fully change the situation and the difficulties we suffered in the history, and it's totally
积贫积弱的悲惨境况。
change the people's situations.
13亿多中国人民
Right now, with 1.3 billion populations in China, we are fully encouraged and passionate, and we feel the vibrant in China.
我们5000多年的中华文明
With more than 5,000 years of histories, China is
我们党的领
showing
导
its
和我国社会主义制
beauty
度
in
坚强牢固
the on the stage, and our leadership
中国
also
人
full
民
of
和中华民族
energy. The Chinese people and the nation
前途光明
will, of course, embrace a bright
处在这
future.
样一个伟大时代
And in this great era, we full of confidence and proud.
同时
And at the same time,
责任重大
we shoulder a heavy
我们要拿出勇气
responsibilities. We should be brave
干劲
and
在
passionate
一代一代中国共产党人团结带领人民创造的历
and
史伟业
with
的
the older generations of the party members
创造出
to
无愧于时代的
create
业绩，大踏步走向
achievements
充满
and
希
make
望
great
的
strides to promising future.
这次大会强调
The 19th CPC National Congress emphasized we should always keep in mind our original aspirations and our missions. Our aspiration and missions
中国人民谋幸福
are to seek happiness for the Chinese people
谋复兴
and rejuvenation for the Chinese
这个
nation.
初心和使命
The aspiration and mission
激励中国共产党人不断
are
前进
to
的根本动力。
encourage
全党同志
our parties to moving forward.
人民同呼
The
吸
party will
共
always
命运
stay with the
心连
people
心
hand in hand
永远把人民
fully
对美好生
connected.
活的向往
We always put
作为
people's
奋斗目标
ever-growing
以永不
demand
懈
for
怠
a
的
better
精神
life
状态
as our goal.
和一往无前的
We'll work
奋斗姿态
tirelessly and forge
继
ahead
续朝着
towards
实现中华民族伟大复兴
the
的
journey
宏伟目标
of realizing the rejuvenation for the Chinese nation.
全党要紧密团结
The
在
whole party
党
should
中央周围，高举
uphold
中国特色社会主义伟大旗
the
帜，
leadership of CPC Central
解
Committee
放思想，
and the
改
socialism
革创新，
with Chinese characteristics and make innovations and
带领全国
work
各族
hard
人民，为
in order
实
to
现党的
lead
19大
people from all
确定的
ethnic
目标任务
groups
而奋斗。
and fight to achieve the goals made by the 19th National Congress.
中 请全体起立。
Please all rise.
《奏国际歌》。
In the international anthem.
Now
I declare
the
19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China is successfully closed.
Well, that was the closing session of the 19th Party Congress of CPC. It saw the election of the members of CPC 19th Central Committee and also the 19th CPC Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, or CCDI for short. And it also saw the approval of the report presented by the 18th CPC Central Committee and the report on the work of CCDI. It also adopted the amendment to the party's constitution. And the first plenary session of the 19th Party Congress is going to be convened tomorrow. And the members of the Standing Committee of the Politburo will be meeting the public tomorrow as well. Well, in his closing speech at the closing session, Xi Jinping stressed the leadership of a CPC in China and also confirmed the roadmap for China's development in the next 5 years, and also thanked foreign leaders, parties and organizations and the institutions for their congratulation messages. Well, for more discussion into the 19th Party Congress, let's turn back to our studio guests, Mr. Zhang Jianhua and Mr. Lawrence Brahm. Welcome back, gentlemen. Well, first of all, Mr. Zhang and Mr. Brahm, what's your impression of the closing ceremony? What messages have you got from the closing session?
Yeah, I think that closing ceremony shows that all the whole party, all of those members agreed very, very important, consensus, on both parties, constitution's revision. I saw as Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism. I saw as so lot of new ideas, including Belt and Road Initiative and green water, green mountain. That's also the golden mountain, golden water, something like that. I think that all of the new thoughts will pave a new way for China's both social, economic development, as well as political, military, many aspects, since.
What about you, Brom?
We have a major shift from the Deng Xiaoping era, where it was socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics, to now socialism in the new era. That new era is absolutely critical, because it's not just about driving forward the economy, it's about the quality of economy. Very clearly, this is a blueprint for closing gaps between rich and poor, for energizing the economy in an innovative way that involves education, new industries, the environment as actually an industry in itself, the preservation of the environment, new energy, science, and of course, taking that into the global context with the Belt and Road. So this is very much about a new face for the CPC and a new direction, and this is really a blueprint, a very detailed blueprint for the next 5 years.
With new tasks ahead. Well, Lawrence, you might have noticed that all the documents, all the personnel changes were approved with a very high yes rate, with no single objections. That's where the Western media actually put question marks on. What's your explanation?
Western democracy is about conflict and the winner takes all. This is about consensus. And of course, it's about a long process of consensus. This process has been going on not only for months, but maybe even years, in terms of bringing together a comprehensive agenda that everybody can agree on, and now it's about getting the job done. Where in a Western democracy, often after the election, the fighting begins between the parties and nothing gets done. The other key thing to think about here in the consensus process is a way of letting Westerners look at it. This is like a corporation having a board meeting and looking at what would be the business plan for the next 5 years. And you can think of the standing committee as the board of directors, and the Politburo is really the management committee. And what we see here, what has just taken place down the street of the Great Hall of the People, is really the shareholders meeting, approving this blueprint that has been in the making for quite a few years.
We'll be getting back to you in a moment, gentlemen, for more insights. Now let's turn to our reporter Liu Yang in the capital of Sichuan province, in the city of Chengdu. Sichuan is the largest province in southwest China, and the area has taken advantage of its great economic potential over the past 5 years. So Liu Yang, how bright are the development prospects there?
As one of the experts mentioned, we have likely only seen the beginning of the new normal urge to continue rejuvenating the nation and to help people realize their Chinese dream. In Sichuan, there are many problems that continuously need to be analyzed, and this won't change over the next 5 years. For example, employment opportunities for migrant workers returning from coastal cities, left behind children, education and medical care equality, the preservation of cultural heritages, ecological protection, and many more. Remember, the most frequently used keyword in Xi Jinping's report was development. Between now and 2022, Sichuan and the rest of the southwest region will go through a tremendous transition phase, but needs to do it through sustainable development. With its advanced land and air network, southwest China's goal is on the right track to becoming an international transport hub and trade center. Sichuan's innovation-driven projects have seen a major boom in recent years. Several high-tech zones, industrial parks, railways linking Chengdu and Europe, and expressways connecting the province with Southeast Asia will all play a significant role in boosting the region's economy. Sichuan is involved in both the Silk Road and Yangtze River economic belts, and of course tourism, which plays a significant role. Last year, the province hosted 630 million foreigners come to Chengdu, and they're not just come to see the giant pandas either. They're here to see the changes that happened in the past 5 years. Get back to you.
Thank you very much, Liu Yang. Now from China's southwest to China's northeast. Now let's go to Cui Huiao in China's northeast part of Liaoning province in Shenyang, the capital city there. So looking ahead, what will be the key factors driving development in the northeast part of China, which is currently going through a very rough economic patch?
Hi there, Doni again. Well, looking ahead for the next 5 years, apart from furthering structural reform and deepening SOE reform, many believe the key for its economic revival is to keep talent. As of right now, many young college grads choose to leave their hometowns for first-year cities where they can find better career opportunities. And how to make these people stay and contribute to their hometown's economy is the challenge facing the provincial government. And I will give you the example of the Changguang satellite, which is the country's first commercial remote sensing satellite maker based in Jilin province. And this company is mostly made up of young engineers between the age 25 and 40. And they told me they decided to work in Northeast China because they see opportunities here both for their personal growth and the entire industry's development. And the pay is pretty close to what they would have gotten in cities like Beijing or Shanghai. And plus they benefit from a number of preferential policies, such as getting discounts on housing and social security as well. So these are the type of things that make talent stay. And to give people that hope and optimism about working and living in Northeast China will always be the central theme as the region seeks revival. As well as how to improve people's livelihood, especially for those in less developed regions, and how to create a healthy business environment so that investors are willing to come here and pour capital into this region. All of these will be the tasks and challenges for the local government ahead over the next 5 years. Back to you, Dongning.
Thank you very much, Cui Hao, reporting from Shenyang, capital city of China's northeast Liaoning province. And now let's get back to our studio guest for more insight into the 19th Party Congress. Mr. Zhang, today we've been looking through all the problems in China, mainly about gaps, disparity between the rich and poor, between the different regions of China. By addressing those problems, by addressing the new contradictions in China, can we expect any policy changes in the future 5 years?
Actually, I think that by this Congress, a lot of difficulties and problems has been fully discussed by those representatives. So the aim, the target is very clear. In the future, we have to chase more balanced regional development. So we have to reduce the rest of those poverty populations. So in this regard, I think that in the future, regional economic cooperation as well as regional integration will be more emphasized, especially if you look at Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei province. We already have a very ambitious integration planning, and we already started to implement. Meanwhile, if you look at our greater Greater Bay in Pearl River Delta, also this planning in progress, and maybe in the near future will be released. So that means Guangdong, Macau, and Hong Kong, there will be the integrated city group. Has a common planning and common development in the future. You know that this region is a very innovation driven oriented economy, also very internationalized, produce so a lot of leading cooperation for China's economy, so very critical. Also, if you look at Yangtze River Delta and Changjiang, Yangtze River economic belt, also we have an integration planning. So this is one very important aspect. Meanwhile, if you look at China's regional cooperation, I mean coastal area, cooperated with the central part of China, western part of China, on the platform of Belt and Road Initiative, and by domestic regional integration and plus our international cooperation with those countries along the routes, with other developed economies, gradually China will create our more open, integrated economic system, and then those economic factors will be reallocated with high efficiency, and then we will chase our innovative economic model and restructure China's economy.
Well, Lawrence, as an observer and also an active participant of China's financial and economic activities, if you're asked to raise any suggestions or advices to the central government, what would yours be?
One of the important things is now to look at China with the outside world and to work with the Belt and Road, ecological civilization, to work with environmental protectionism as a new soft power. It's a part of Chinese tradition that soft power is more important than hard power. And I think what's very critical is now looking at the regional security, that by having the Belt and Road, by having Chinese businesses go outward and invest, and to have infrastructure investments and share the kind of connectivity that you've just been discussing, not just internally but externally across Central Asia, South Asia, going all the way over to the Middle East and to Africa. That connectivity will create a shared prosperity and with it a greater security. I think that's really critical. Also, the role of the yuan currency. We are now looking at China being able to bring its currency through swap arrangements across the border into the level of becoming the second reserve currency. And I'd say that in the next 5 years, that has to be a priority of the government in building a new financial architecture, commensurate with the institutions like AIIB and the new development bank, Silk Road Fund that have been established, but really a new financial architecture with the Belt and Road countries that can ensure a prosperous and shared development among the South-South, and a development which is, again, smart, green, and blue.
Where do you see China standing in the world stage in the next 5 years?
Well, it's taken center stage. I mean, that's very clear. We have, with the Trump administration, failure on climate change with the United States. We have a shift there back to antiquated industries fired up by coal. You have China now leading the world on renewable energy systems, the single largest investor in the world in artificial intelligence. We were just talking about the Guangdong Connect with Shenzhen. I mean, this is all going to be the new Silicon Valley. And I see very important in building strategic relations with its South Asian partners, not just Pakistan, but India as well. This is very, very critical to have these kind of relationships and shared Asian values. I think one of the big misunderstandings in the West, in Europe, is what are Chinese values? And I think we've seen at this party Congress that the China solution is in the room. It's not coming from outside. It's in local context, and a rejuvenation of Chinese culture, which has some really incredible values, and a lot of the concepts of environmental protection are part of the traditional Chinese value. Thrift, conservation, all of these things are there. And by resuscitating this, I think with other Asian countries that have similar and shared values, building along the Belt and Road, not just infrastructure development alone, but also a shared set of values that can be embraced not only in Asia, but by the rest of the world.
Well, Mr. Zhang, one of the very important agenda at the closing session of the 19th CPC Congress actually is the amendment of the party constitution, which has a new amendment, which is the conclusion of the new era thought.
Yeah.
So how do you see the significance of this new amendment?
Yeah. Actually, in the past, you see every time our party's Congress, actually parties' constitutions had been revised. That's because 5 years longer a little bit, and after 5 years, situation has been changed. We are facing with different problems, both for social and economic development, diplomatic relationship, and global development trend has been changed. So for China, I think the important thing is that our party's constitutions is aiming for, we have to grasp those new trends.
Right.
We have to facing with new problems, for example, new contradictions.
Right.
Also, we have to have a new idea, new thoughts on those problems. That's why we have our, Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism with Chinese characters. So we have to solve those problems by ourselves instead of, outside, idea. So that's a very important points. Also, that in that progress, we have to have some of additional, new, elements, new thoughts to provide solutions for different problems in different fields. So that's why for environmental protection issues, we have our so-called, green mountain, green water, that's also golden, and silver, this type of, saying, added in our, party's constitutions. Of course, the Belt and Road Initiative on behalf of, China's new idea on, international regional cooperation as well as new global governance, thoughts, and then, also written in the new constitutions. So generally speaking, I think that new constitutions actually has a system of new ideas on not only political issues, military security issues, as well as economic and social development, and also regarding those concerned issues by people. Yeah.
So one is to keep the party constitution as well up with the change of time, and also shows the determination of developing China to the next stage, which is the great power in the world by the year 2050. All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Lawrence Brahm and Mr. Zhang Jianping, thank you very much for your insight today.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we conclude our special coverage of the National Congress of CPC, the 19th CPC National Congress. And coming up is Global Watch. Still with me. Stay tuned.